All right, we are now live. So let me take this banner off here. And there we are. Good evening, everybody. It's been a minute since I've been on a podcast. Missed the last couple ones. Dave filled in for me. Awesome friend. Good to be back. And we got William Philippek, Dave. Awesome friend trio. We always have good conversations together. We bring up a lot of really good topics. Today we're going to be talking about husbandry, reptile community, just a little bit of everything. So if anybody wants to put some comment in it or whatever, be part of the conversation. So we're just going to kind of wing it as we always do. It's going to be very real. And so first things first, I would like to give a big shout out to USARK. Of course, we should all be supporting USARK. They fight for your right and my right, everybody's rights that have a vested interest in the exotic reptile, community alike, exotic community / reptile community. A lot of this legislation does pour into other species as well. And, USARK does an incredibly good job at mitigating, poor legislation that is intended to hurt the reptile hobby. So please support USARK in any way you can, whether it's buying merchandise. They have memberships and stuff. You can donate. At reptile shows, there's they have the auctions that are always really great. And, Vanessa, Phil, Daniel, they all do a really good job. And the lawyer team they have now is fantastic. And they've been mitigating and pushing off a lot of really poor imposed legislation that could hurt our rights to own the animals that we love. And then we have the Reptile Super Show coming up, Anaheim. It is in September. You have to look up the dates. I can't remember. I was supposed to be at this one. I might not be able to make it now. But the Reptile Super Show, I will definitely be there in January. Pomona, it's an amazing expo. It's really great for networking, really cool hangout place, and just overall a lot of fun. And so we're going to add Dave, and we're going to add William. What's up, guys?
Pretty good, you?
Doing good, Dave. It looks like you got a dildo fishing lure hanging off your hat, and you are outside.
Great outdoors, buddy. Great outdoors. Got a fishing shirt on, too.
Okay. You got salmonoids on your shirt. Pretty cool.
Trout noise.
Troutnoids. Well, trouts are a type of salmon.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
Good question. Do I have an echo?
No,
Yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I noticed. Me too.
Really? All right, let me try to fix that real quick, and then we're going to go into, I can go to mic settings. I can reduce background noise. And mic settings for both of you. Now let's see how that is. How's that?
Check.
I would say still there a little bit.
Still there a little better? Okay.
Still there? I can X out and give it back in 2 minutes.
You can do that. See if that helps out. All right.
Yeah.
So, William, you were not at Daytona, right?
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many people there. I didn't think you were. I thought it was unlikely that we just didn't happen to run into each other. I didn't then, but I just went out there to hang out and see all the reptiles and everything.
Right.
I do a lot of reptile shows. I'm like, you know what I should do for a short vacation? Let's go to another reptile show.
I'm debating about vending Daytona. It's been a long time since I've gone down. I've never been to Daytona. But I'm hearing everyone talk about this. It has to be in close to the end or something. I feel more pressure to want to do it.
Right. All right. I'm removing all this stuff. Let's see if that helps. I removed everything. I removed the echo cancellation.
Hello?
Does that help? Yeah, William's echoing. There is an echo. Yeah, 2 people saying there's an echo. I don't know. I took off all of the things. It's probably just picking up the speaker. Shit. I don't know. I don't have my normal mic set up. I forgot it. It should be okay.
Yeah, I don't know what I can do.
Yeah, I forgot my mic here too because I'm actually not at my place.
I I have a microphone. I can like disconnect and use my phone. I don't know
Yeah, if you do that, it'll definitely help a big time. I wish I had my mic because mine might be picking up some of your volume. So yeah, see if you can plug that mic in. The mic should help.
Oh, plug it in?
Yeah.
Oh, I disconnected.
Oh, okay, disconnect. Okay, so you were plugged in. Okay, let's see if this is in.
Yeah, we're plugged in. I didn't know that was causing.
Okay, how about now?
Now?
Yeah, it sounds bad.
Yeah. Didn't fix it.
Yeah, it didn't really seem to help.
Nope. Connected.
I'm trying. I mean, I only got so many options here. Here, try talking when I mute myself. See if it echoes.
Hello? Yeah, I don't hear the echo now.
I mean, I could do this. I could just keep my thumb here, and when it's time for, I'll just mute myself. I could just be like, "Hey, what do you think of carpet pythons current?"
Oh God, it's gonna be one of those, huh?
I mean, if I only have to do it on my end, it's not a big deal for me. I might forget, but
might forget. So how was your little break? Is it getting crazy over there with all the babies?
I am hatching out babies right now, and actually we're getting quite a few eggs. Breeding some late, and yeah, that's it's actually starting to get crazy now just for eggs. I do have some babies hatched. I have some pretty cool projects, like I had Super Arctic caramel, some Super Arctic frost stuff, and trying to think what else. I made some really nice Swiss combos, like Swiss that are multi-hets. It's like Swiss condas and Swiss Arctics that are het frost, and I made some that are actually Swiss, visual Swiss, het caramel, het hypo, het axanthic, and I have another clutch where it's just a few, but there's Swiss and Swiss anacondas, het caramel, het hypo, het axanthic, and het toffee belly. So 4-way hets.
Damn. Yeah, that's impressive, man. I'm so disconnected with the colubrid stuff. I don't ever know what's going on. I figured most of the colubrid guys would have had babies hatching out by now. I thought that's what was going on.
I do. I mean, it was mostly just like, yeah, I mean, I still have a lot of babies from last season. So that's one reason, like, I, breed in different, I kind of break it up. So, I do have like, a couple hundred babies, or a little more than that we hatched, between like March and like May. And then there's been a kind of a slowdown now. And now, a good amount of the eggs that I had earlier hatched out, or most of them will be hatched out soon. And now I'm starting to get more eggs. Like if you look at my stories, I just posted like got a decent amount of clutches.
Okay. Just hog noses, or what else you got going on over there?
Some leopard geckos, mainly, of course, hognose. How about you? What are you doing with your season with your pythons? Is there stuff going right now?
I'm pretty much towards the end. I only got one more clutch, potentially. Well, I've bred them before. I don't want to say what it is right now because I don't want to jinx myself and she slugs out on me again. But one more species, well, one more python in general, and then I should be done. And then I got, what do I got now? 20 more clutches to hatch still, I think. So we'll see. Right now I'm getting babies eating and established and everything. I got pygmy pythons to hatch. I caved in. I didn't want to start cyst feeding them, or I tried and it was a pain in the ass. So I picked up morning geckos to feed them. Pick up a colony of them to breed, to use them as feeders.
I see. Do you ever try any like lizard and like frog scenting for like lizard like eating species? Does that work at all, or is you really need that live lizard?
From everything I've heard of, with at least the pygmy pythons, it seems to be just either people going straight to assist feeding them or something like that. And I tried assist feeding them, and I was just like, oh, I'm not doing this. I was like, I gave up on it. I got out of 2, I got 1 to eat. The other one ended up spitting it out. And then after that, I tried to do geckos, but that one I think I stressed it out to the point it just didn't bounce back from it. But the other one has been eating some of the geckos. So I'm going to try getting them established for a little while in geckos, or eating geckos for a little while. And then I'm going to do pinky cup trick. I just put an unscented pinky in there with like gecko and see if I can get it excited enough to eat a pinky too, along with the gecko.
All right. Yeah, my one friend, he makes the scent strips, and they're basically gauze strips that have liquefied and blended frog and lizard that are dehydrated into these strips, so it's like really concentrated. It works pretty good for hognose and like king snakes, and somebody actually had good success with their I think they were Amazon. No. I think they were the Dominican red mountain boas, and they worked really well on those. I think that was the species. So I wonder if those would help with like the anthills, like the pygmy pythons. I mean, it has a smell, but I mean, if I have like a baby hognose that will eat absolutely like nothing, like, you know, it won't take a live pink, won't take any type of scented pink, you know, you can scent it with like anything and it doesn't take it. If I give it like a small frog or especially like a little lizard, live little lizard, because in the wild they eat a lot of little lizards and lizard eggs. In some areas they're finding they're eating more of those when they're young than actual amphibians. And man, if you put in like a runt leopard gecko, which I have and am done with, like, you know, hogs that won't eat absolutely anything. If I have a small enough leopard gecko that's like, you know, not doing good, it hatched out like half the size it should have, they like almost always eat that. It's like a really, like, if you have a hognose, like out of 10 that, like, say 10 hognose that are like your worst feeders ever, and you can't get them to eat absolutely anything, they'll take a small lizard almost every time. I'd say 9 out of 10 would.
Okay. Well, I get random question I've been wanting to ask you now, since you deal with a smaller species that tends to eat more reptilian-based diet, is do you find any issues with females that you feed too many rodents to? Like, as in, I guess she has too much fat built up that she lays a poor clutch, rather mostly infertiles or few fertile eggs or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, if you overfeed a female hognose snake, I'd say a lot of it comes before you're actually breeding them. And it goes for like boas and pythons, you know, and like, I mean, certain pythons, like ball pythons, and maybe even blood pythons, maybe a little bit, they seem to be a pretty big glutton for punishment if you like slam them with food. They kind of have that ability to have the extra fat stores. But, you know, even for them, I'm sure it's, you know, not good. And I've seen people where they overfeed like a ball python and they end up not being a good breeder, and that's probably a correlation. But I know it's like way more important for like boas. I mean, if you get like boas, Dave, you know, boa breeder. And I always used to hear, like, when I was like in my teens and like 20s, like, you know, guys that would slam them with rats and get their, you know, boa constrictor females, like, you know, their red tails to like 7.5 foot long. And they're like, you know, like this big around in his first year, and they're trying to get it to breed, and it's like 4 years old or whatever, 3.5. And they a lot of times do poor because they're like this, you know, pumped up over it, like fed snake. And it kind of goes hand in hand with hognose snakes. And, you know, hognose snakes in the wild, they have, you know, periods where the temperature gets cooler and they're, you know, eating infrequently. And they also have a varied diet versus in captivity. We're keeping them at optimal, real hot temperatures, like summer-like temperatures, 24/7. And then they're getting fed all the time. And they're getting fed a rich, fatty diet. And so if you keep your females like more lean and you, you know, kind of space out their feedings and you manage your feedings instead of like just consistently feeding them like every 5-7 days, they definitely do a lot better. And if you vary their diet, and, you know, the one thing is like mice have, like, you know, mice are, you know, more rich with fats, and then they don't have like really any like omega-3s, versus like amphibians and reptiles, they have more omega-3s. So if you have an animal that's eating more amphibians in a while, it's getting a lot more omega-3s.
Right.
And, you know, mice might have, I think, more omega-6s, especially with like a grain diet. And they have like they basically have like no omega-3. So, you know, I think the one thing is like, that's why supplementing is very beneficial for hognose snakes, managing their food, not overfeeding them. And so when you do those things, you get an overall better animal. So I do pretty good with an all rodent diet, but I do like to incorporate, let's say, like hard-boiled egg, or like, you know, and if you could get Reptilinks or do that, you know, or even put in some quail in their diet, you know, that's good, you know. And then of course supplementing. And the only time I really feed hognose a lot is like when they're gravid. After that, I try to slow it down. So what do you guys think? Welcome back, Dave. You know, when it comes to feeding your python and boas, and, you know, species you work with, what approach do you take, keeping your adult breeder females healthy?
All right. Well, I had one question for you. We might have talked about this in the past, but have you ever considered some kind of meal to give your rodents as a gut load for your hognose?
We got William again. Hold on.
All right. Now,
Hold on. We might have to. Which one do I remove from the stage? I'm gonna. Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah, I mean, the one thing you can do is really beneficial. I do it barely though. Is I do feed my feeder rodents insects, mainly mealworms, and then like dried soldier fly larvae and a mix of seeds. But they mostly have lab block chow, just a kind of like standard like lab block chow for rodents. And I do incorporate like a mix sometimes of like dehydrated, dried out soldier fly larvae, mealworms, and then every now and then we could throw in mealworms we're actually breeding because like Crystal started setting up mealworm groups and stuff, and we get the extra beetles and and I do throw in like mix of seeds for them.
Would you want all those insects to be digested in the mouse before you give it, or do you think it'd be more beneficial to give it to the mice just prior to feeding the snake?
I mean, I'd probably want the mouse to at least like digest it pretty well, because then that if there's any remaining material, the hognose can actually digest that as well, easier. One thing you can do too, and this is one that I don't think people do with boas, but it might be beneficial because every now and then I'll hear of boas. I don't know if you get many python species like this with sensitive stomachs. And there's one product that I like to use a lot, and I think it's more popularized in the coolibrid community. And that's about it. It's the NutriBac, and it's a probiotic for reptiles and amphibians. And man, it really helps aid in digestion. Like if you have a hognose snake that has a hard time digesting meals, or it seems they be deficient in gut flora from like, so let's say antibiotic like use, the NutriBac actually really seems to work. And if you put NutriBac, like let's say like I got a pinky mouse, you just let it sit there, it turns the pinky mouse into like a gummy bear. And so you could actually kind of see it take effect. And if I ever had a hognose with like a sensitive stomach, or let's say it's like had a bacterial infection and I had to give it antibiotics, and then it's like having a hard time with meals or something like, I have a lot of people come to me with hognose snakes that have issues, or like issues with roundworm, and man, NutriBac really helps break down and digest the material, and it seems like it probably populates their their gut lining, which that's what it's supposed to do. I'm a little skeptical just because I'm going to anthropomorphize a bit, but like probiotics only work so well for humans. So it's like, well, how good can a probiotic work for reptiles with very little research, I'd imagine, into the field compared to what has been done with like, say, organisms like humans, or like even dogs and cats, where they offer like supplementation in livestock, like animals. Anyway, the NutriBac seems to really work though. It's a little plastic jar. Plastic container comes in, you refrigerate it, and man, it works. You put it on the mouse, it helps break it down. And I've had hognose where they have a hard time digesting stuff. You put that on there, boom, all of a sudden they're digesting.
So how you measuring that out with NutriBac? You just rolling it around in there a little bit, like?
Yeah, good question. You know what? I just put a little bit on, like a little pinch per mouse. I can't remember the instructions. Like, I don't think they actually have a weight amount that you put on there. You just kind of put it on there, and that's it. And you can't like overdose, I'm sure. I'm sure you probably give them like a little too much, where it kind of is like just unnecessary. But you just put like a little bit, just like a small little coating. I wonder if that'd help with like any type of boas that, let's say, might have a sensitive digestive tract.
Maybe. I've used Benebac, but I wouldn't say that it's 100%, and I don't know how close those products are to each other.
That is a Dick Timothy hanging from Dave's hat. It's also a big dog that's with him. The Benebac I've used, I've had more success, I'd say, with NutriBac. I've seen more results with NutriBac, where it's like, okay, it actually seems like the hognose digest better and stuff, and so I mean, I've seen some like improvements with animals with the NutriBac. And I don't know, do you guys use this for like pythons and boas? I know that you got the Da Vinci and stuff supplement, but how often are you guys supplementing your boas and pythons?
So, side note before we jump to it, so with our Angolan pythons, Bree has used NutriBac if she's had any regurgitation issues, and that seems to calm things down.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Okay. So yeah, it does work even. So you guys are using that. Yeah, it's a pretty cool product. You know, it's definitely effective. So it's pretty neat when you get a product like that and you actually see results. Because sometimes you know, you're giving something calcium and vitamins, and over the long term, you know, it's like, you know, okay, these extra nutrients are good for the animal, but sometimes you don't really see the results. You know, it's like you can't really tell. It's like, so then you're wondering, is this really doing something? Because I can't visually tell the difference. And you know, it's going to be helping, but you just wonder how much. But then you see something like a product like NutriBack, and it does, you know, help a lot, you know. So, and William, have you tried any of these?
Yeah, William. Is he frozen this whole time? I can't tell if William's frozen.
Yeah, sorry about that. It booted me out twice. My Wi-Fi just kicked me out of the Streamlabs twice. Didn't know what was going on. Yeah, I use both products. They seem about the same to me. I haven't noticed much difference as far as I could tell. Yeah, I don't. So I remember, I don't know what spurred this conversation. I don't know if it had to do with like the Angolans or something that occasionally have problems. But I remember I was talking to Ryan about it. And we were wondering maybe it was scarring of the stomach. And then whenever you feed it something a little too big, it stretches it all out and causes, you know, it to stress out and it just regurgitates it. Because it doesn't end up like, if you give it too big of a meal, it seems to cause issues. And the wild part is, it's not like a boa constrictor where they just steadily decline if they keep doing it. I had an issue where just one of the Angolans kept doing it, and then I switched it to smaller prey, and it seemed to be triggered by like environment changes rather than like changing environments or moving it from place to place or something. Because I didn't have any issues with the Angolans, and then when I changed them from like moving from the original place to the building, I started noticing issues with that. Now all of them seem to have subsided it, as long as I don't just pound too big of a prey or something. But other than that, it seemed to mellow out. I still have one that gives me trouble every now and again, but that was the thing I could think of that could have caused it. I don't know if it's, you know, too big of a meal and it's stressed out, it's spit up and caused scarring or something on the wall, and now it just takes a while longer. I've only ever waited up to 3 weeks before I feed them again. So I'm breaking up.
Yeah, break it up a little bit. You might have to exit and enter again, maybe.
Yeah, because you have really great things to say, William, but
yeah, it's about Angolan pythons again. So I guess this sounds like a common maybe problem with some Angolan pythons. Is that what's going on, Dave?
You just can't go too big with a meal of Angolans. You know, you go too big, they tend to regurg. I think that's across the board with all breeders, as far as I'm aware. You know, we are cautious about the size of the meal we give our animals.
Even if it's slight.
Yeah, it could be just a little bit bigger and you can run into an issue, but it's easy to solve, like you said, whether it's the Benebact or whether we just essentially space out their meals a little more after a regurg. A lot of times, even with baby boa, I like to wait a week or two before I offer another meal, and I usually go half the size to make sure it breaks the meal down. And I've been experimenting a little bit this year with rat pinks with baby boas that regurg a fuzzy mouse, just to see if that breaks down a little faster. Honestly, so far I've seen good results, but I've only had like 3 test subjects. But yeah, in the past, I've usually stuck it out with mice. I'm finding that these rat pinks are actually helping out with some regurg issues.
Interesting. Yeah, so the NutriBack definitely helps aid in digestion. So that's probably one reason you're seeing that help there. But yeah, but I didn't know the Angolan pythons are like that, where you need like smaller meals. I mean, it's probably the issue. It's like a certain, like, I know it's like, well, I'll give you an example. Hognose snakes. If I feed an adult female, a pretty big mouse, sometimes they'll regurgitate it. And it's not because, you know, it was too big. I mean, it's kind of part of the problem, but not really. It's because a large mouse has a pretty thick hide, and it has all that hair that needs to digest too, or try to like digest around it. And, you know, even if stomach acids start to break down the skin, it can take a long time because these really big adult mice get these pretty thick hides on them. So if you ever see a snake, like a female hognose eats too big of a mouse and she regurgitates it like 3 days later, it's, the mouse the skin is not permeated. While it's kind of broken down a little bit, this mouse's skin is kind of still intact. And so it was taking too long for them to break it down. So mouse is going to just start to kind of decompose because it's not digesting it as fast as it should. And that's because of that mouse hide.
Am I coming in choppy still?
You're good for now.
Don't be scared, buddy. You sound a lot better.
Yeah, I'm just making sure before I get ramble.
We did have reps in Texas, and this is what we've had so far with or he's had so far, but I've sold some because I saw some of the scent strips he makes, and I've had some feedback from somebody that had an Eastern hognose that only ever ate 2 mice in a 5-year period, and it ate with one of the scent strips. So he's had king snakes, every hognose species worked on so far, tree boas and sand boas.
As far as what?
I like that.
That's for
So,
the
you think
scent
this would be a
strips.
good-
That's the lizard frog scent strips, and those are species that it's worked on. Babies that don't want to eat straight pinky mouse.
All right. See, what I was finding issues, so this is back on that pygmy python situation, was and why I was asking about that with hognoses. I know hognoses have a higher metabolism, so they could probably take a bit more feedings. But pygmy pythons are still an ambush predator that still, can go periods of time without eating meals to begin with. And then on top of that, because they are one of the smaller species of predators there, and they compete with stuff like Western Stimsons, they typically will stay eating a reptile-based diet compared to Stimson's python that will eventually go through an ontogenetic diet shift and switch over to mammals at some point. So the pygmy python never really switches past the point of really eating. I'm sure they will occasionally eat mammals if they're available, but it seems like they primarily stick on a reptile-based diet. Well, I was talking to Ryan Young, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, man, I had the best success with pygmy pythons when I would feed them maybe 4 or 5 meals and then breed them. And then they typically lay better clutches. Rather, it's just you're pounding them with just too many mammals. And because I usually, typically with my Australian stuff, I'm feeding this time of year. So I'm usually feeding them all up before November, and then I'll cut them off, let them empty their bowels, and then, I'll start breeding them. Well, I've been having issues with pygmy pythons where they lay either half-ass clutches or sometimes even slug out. And I was talking to Ryan, and he was saying, he's like, yeah, I barely feed mine much anything. Like, I don't, he feeds them like hopper mice, even though they could eat, small adult mice or something like that. I thought about giving mine quail too, because I have one female in particular that's yet to breed for me that I've been feeding like this, and I haven't fed her since April, and she doesn't look like she's changed. So I guess they're just especially if they have enough fat reserves, they can coast an incredible amount of time, it seems like. So yeah, that was kind of what led me on what I was wondering about with the hognoses. Yes. Sorry, Dave.
Okay, thank you. So, could you go in a little more detail on why Ryan thinks a smaller meal would prevent a female from slugging out or having bad clutches?
Well, he was talking about not even just smaller meals, but just not feeding them as much. Like my carpet, say for my Stimsons and Spotteds, I typically feed them. They might eat, if I had to guess, maybe 10 to 12 meals a year, give or take, like adult mice. And, because they're primarily reptile specialists, the pygmies and even the pygmy banded pythons are too. And if they never used to eating anything like a fatty mammal, then they're, and then in captivity, that's all you're giving them, especially say like an ambush predator that typically isn't going to, have as much success as a forager or something that goes out looking for food. So he said, especially with the mammals, the fatty captive mammals we're feeding them, rodents, he said, I would just lessen the food size, and then I just don't feed them as much, and they seem to retain the weight for an extended period of time. Like I said, I have that one pygmy python that's, even the ones that did lay for me this year, they just don't. It doesn't look like it phased them. Like they didn't look like any different than what they did prior to breeding.
So
I think that's a
is the
common
argument
thing. Oh, go ahead.
fatty areas in the snake are not allowing sperm to pass through the ovum? Like, I'm still trying to understand the reasoning behind the diet. Like, what exactly is causing a blockage or preventing a female from giving good eggs or bad eggs just because of meals? That's kind of like what my curiosity is here.
Well, from what I understand, this was a long time ago, is Tracy Barker was telling Ryan that it seems like the more fat you have built up on those pythons, I don't know if it's issues with the sperm getting to, or if the follicles even develop right, I guess, because of the fat on the follicles could be hindering them from process or growing or something. I'm assuming that's what it is. And like I said, if you're feeding an animal, because I would look at a lot of pygmy pythons. Like if you look at a lot of pygmy pythons, for instance, you don't really see them they're usually really, really lean. And in captivity, we make them really, really fat. And I tend to like keeping my stuff more similar to what at least in the off season. Like if I'm not breeding them and it's the off season where I typically don't feed, I like them keeping more almost like a wild type body structure, at least as much as I can. So that's why I was hang on, now I gotta read. Continue, Dave.
Well, no, I appreciate that explanation a little better, because that was one thing with boas back in the day. There was talk about obesity in boas, that all that extra built up fat in the animal would press up against developing babies and possibly cause stillborns or kinked animals during development.
Wow.
But was it true? It's hard to say, because I have had kinking in animals that are more on the slender side. But I will say in boas, especially, the bigger the animal, the more complications I feel like I have during a breeding season.
I think some of the things, like let's say an overweight snake has a harder time getting gravid, or there's more fat pressing against the babies. I think that's just like kind of like a simple explanation that's kind of like seems like it might make sense. But overall, it's like most of these animals we have in captivity that are being fed very frequently have a lot of excessive fat stores and are being, like William said, overfed in contrast to how they're eating in the wild. And then we're feeding them this heavily dense fatty diet. And actually, like, you got to think too, like lab mice are actually taken care of pretty well. Would we all agree on that? Like if you get lab mice from a true lab, they're actually pretty clean, because the labs are keeping them clean, and they're probably feeding them like just like an average staple, lab block diet. But one study I was reading, I can't reference it because I don't remember what it was, but I read it, and it almost all like laboratory mice had D3 deficiencies. And so that's why I think it's important for supplementation, but also, no like species of animal does better being obese. And I think a lot of reptiles, when we're overfeeding them and they get kind of thick bodied, we see them as healthy, but in contrast to what they're supposed to be, they're actually have excessive fat stores, and they're actually more unhealthy in a lot of these cases. Like you could have an obese hognose. Like I know so many people that overfeed female hognose snakes, and most of these people, if you ask them about their hognose snakes, they wouldn't describe any one of them as being obese. And even if visibly looking at them, their phenotype, their visual structure doesn't really look like that of an obese snake, because we kind of project our feelings and thoughts of what they should look like onto them. Like, oh, okay, this looks like a robust, healthy hognose. But then if you do a necropsy on it, these things have very excessive like fat stores. And what William said, what Tracy Barker was saying, that's what I strongly agree with that. With when you have a snake that is unhealthy due to being overfed, could be husbandry, excessive bacteria levels because it's dirty, they're going to produce unhealthy egg follicles. And if they don't have healthy egg follicles, they have a hard time becoming fertilized. And then if they have an unhealthy body too, with excessive fat stores, they're more likely to have complications, developing eggs, becoming fertilized. If you look at any animal that's like obese, they don't really do well. I mean, there's certain species like leopard geckos, they store excessive fat in their tails, and they store it in other parts of their body too, but most notably in their tail. And African fat-tail geckos, a number of other species do too. Even beetle lizards, they store a lot of fat in their tails. But you start seeing these people, they get the tails fully filled up, and then it starts going into their body. I've seen people with leopard geckos that have poor fertility issues. And if you ever look at the majority of leopard geckos that have poor fertility issues, Their tails look like turnips. Their bodies look like blimps. And it's like, okay, that's, this isn't, a coincidence. It's like 2 + 2 is 4 here. And even with these boas, like you guys have seen these lean, muscular boas, and they're eating infrequently, and they're feeding on like a more diverse diet, and that's giving them more healthy parameters to develop healthy egg follicles. If you have healthy egg follicles, they have an easier time becoming fertilized. Like, when I have people that message me and are like, hey, my female hoggos are slugging out, a lot of times people want to blame the males. I say very rarely it's the male's problem. Sometimes it is, but more likely, in almost all cases, these females have poor egg follicles. And I've seen it too with hognose where I get a locked. Here's an example. This has happened to me probably 50 to 100 times in my life. I bred a male hognose to a female, first-year breeder. I don't reintroduce the male after this one lock. This female lays either all slugs or has very poor fertility her first clutch. All right. And I bred her in proper time. It was like way ahead of the ovulation. So it's not like I missed it. Maybe in some cases, but in a lot of cases, I did not. And then she goes to double clutch. I did not reintroduce the male. She lays a double clutch with stored sperm and has better fertility. And the only difference is, okay, her oviduct was primed now. These are her next set of follicles, and these sets of follicles are healthier. That's the only thing that I think logically and consistently makes sense. Because if you have a hognose or any other animal with elevated bacteria levels, unhealthy, bacteria in their system, so it's systemic, so it's through their bloodstream, that goes into everything in their body along with their egg follicles being produced. And so an animal that is unhealthy can produce these unhealthy egg follicles that have a hard time becoming fertilized. And I think that's the key there.
I don't want to derail this with an old thing, but in Buffalo, New York, there was this rehab place I bring up a lot called Rare. Mary was the one who ran it from Western New York, probably ran into her, but she once got a ball python in that was housed with a Burmese python 2 years prior. 2 years after that, it became gravid and had a clutch of burn balls.
That's pretty cool. I just had somebody with a hognose they got from me a year and a half, or they got it from me almost like 10 months ago. And the last time I had bred it before they got it was like nearly a year ago. So it laid eggs, and it was a dual-sired clutch. So it retained sperm for about a year and a half. Now, it's uncommon for hognose to retain sperm for like a year plus, but I don't know. So that's 2 years for a ball python. William, have you ever seen, or what's the longest you've heard of like sperm retention for a python or boa species?
You got his volume off. Tell him to stop talking.
All right, wait, William, can you hear? I think I didn't touch anything. How is this even happening?
Yeah, I can't hear.
I have his mute off. Let me see the mic settings. That's crazy.
Well, I guess we stopped talking to Will, and we just talked to each other.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, exit and enter back in. I don't know why I did it. Because I'm only hitting my mic. So I'm hitting mine sometimes because, there was feedback. So when I'm not talking, I've just been muting. And then Lisa's like, what about using multiple males? And I think that's like, a great idea. Anytime I have a female hognose that's reluctant, and then if you have had one with past, fertility issues, I think multiple males will help. Obviously the female's egg follicles have to be healthy enough in these scenarios to become fertilized. And but I mean, it definitely helps. I mean, that's definitely, yeah.
No, 100%. Honestly, even with boa constrictors, I almost want to get to the point where I'm more 2 males to 1 female, or at least close to that. Jeremy Stone used to talk about that in the DVD he did, and honestly, it helps if you have extra males. And back when I did blue tongue skinks, early days of breeding blue tongue skinks, I'd put 1 male with multiple females and cross males with multiple females. And long story short, females that I'd have 2 different males on had a higher success rate. But I stopped doing that because everybody wanted lineage, and I was more concerned about the lineage.
Sure.
Yeah. Do I have an echo now? Did William give me echo?
No, I think it's fine. I don't know. Well, when William came in, I seen a mute button above his thing.
Yeah. How am I sitting outside in the yard by a fire in the middle of nowhere and William can't make this work in his building?
I don't know. Every time we've had William be with us, I mean, it's always been good. This is the first time it's been. Oh shit, he left again. Blazing Blue Tongue says, "Is that why you wanted me to come to Missouri, Dave?"
Yes.
Have you used that fishing lure, Dave, on your hat?
Yeah, actually, I tried for striped bass at night, top water. They weren't mine.
No.
No, I tried hard, man. I wanted that picture.
You'll get it. You just have to keep trying. Or the day when they're like more like aggressive, or they're on, or you see them schooling, they're gonna take it.
Yeah, 'tis the season actually. This is the last couple weeks before they're gonna start moving back into the lake. I might try to take a night trip over the next couple weeks.
Okay. So you're fishing the rivers for these stripers?
Yeah, the spot is called the Norfolk. The dam to the lake, the Norfolk Lake, came down about 10 years ago when they had a big flood. So all the striped bass, the wall, the gar, all these other fish moved their way in the river. So now you can literally catch rainbow trout, brown trout. Well done, sir. Well done. You can catch rainbow trout, brown trout, and you can catch striped bass all in the same spot, a lot of the same lures. So one of my favorite spots to go out fishing to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, nice.
Was it nice? Did that feel nice?
Yeah, we got William back. Hold on. Let's see how.
Oh my God. I don't know if he's talking
Hello,
or
can you
just
hear me?
moving his lips. Yeah, that was close.
Close? So
Say
you
more.
you can't hear me?
Perfect.
We can hear you.
All right, microphone off. Okay, we're just gonna shut this off and put it in the drawer and pretend this isn't even a thing. Okay.
Got to
So what I
simplify it,
missed?
buddy. You really
Yeah,
didn't miss
apparently.
anything, to be honest with you. We've been completely lost without you.
Oh, stop it! You're bullshitting with me. Come on now.
No, I
Who are
don't
we
think we talked
talking?
about anything the whole time. What significant conversation
Boas?
could we have had? No. Talked about fishing.
Okay. I don't
So,
even remember what
Junior,
we were
what was the
talking
last
about with all the
question?
chaos.
We were talking
Oh,
about striped bass, but before that, we were talking about fertility and clutches using multiple males out of females. You know, we talked about supplementation, but a lot of it was like the health of the female's egg follicles, and then using multiple males.
I think you're asking about Australians to hang up too, like certain things with Australian species he works with. If there's dietary issues, that I think kind of an extension on that, maybe.
Yeah, I
We can
had
talk
that
about
one
it.
question, like what's the longest you've had retained sperm for a species?
Oh yeah. For me, only like a year or two, but I've heard Garrick Meyer say he said up to 4 or 5 years with retained sperm in a ball python. I know Warren Booth said rattlesnakes. He's had or he's heard of them going up to 8 years with rattlesnakes, which is odd because I figured if a rattlesnake that's a live bearer could do it, I figured a boa constrictor would be able to do it too.
I wonder if anything of that would have anything to do with like climate, like heat during the summertime, cooking the sperm inside the female, even if she did retain it. So maybe it's got to be a cooler species.
Well, I mean, if pythons are doing it and they can, and they're from equally as warm habitats, I figured that wouldn't make that much of a difference.
Is that study on animals in the wild or captivity?
Well, I wouldn't think it matters. Shit, if anything, ball python people probably keep their stuff hotter than boas.
What is an egg layer and what does give birth? So I wonder if that has anything to do with it too.
Good point.
Yeah.
But then rattlesnakes, the vipers, they give, most vipers, like the rattlesnakes are probably disgusting. They give birth live. And the other thing is too, like you're saying, they're from, the majority of them are from cooler climates, unless we're talking about like an eastern diamondback. They don't experience much cool, but a lot of these rattlesnakes are going in dens, whether they're like Pacific rattlers or prairie rattlers or timbers.
Yeah, William messing up with his whole sound thing really messed up the rhythm of the podcast, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm afraid that no one's going to be able to hear me. I'm just going to ramble to nothingness.
You sound great now. What are some highlights from your season, William? You're always doing so much crazy stuff over there.
I'm pretty much done as far as clutches. All I have is one more female due to lay, and I had that infamous ball python lay a clutch, and I didn't realize she laid a clutch till my dad came in to show somebody some snakes and stuff, and popped open one of the ball python tubs and found a female wrapped up around eggs. I go, oh shoot! I didn't even know she was grabbing. She was one I just gave up on. I didn't know. I was like, well, she's not going, so I just, didn't put no more effort in it. And like I said, I thought she was reabsorbing, so I didn't think it was worth pursuing anymore. But I still didn't take the male out, so I guess it was, still going on. And I'm not because here's the thing too is I'm not really feeding the ball pythons right now, so they're not really pooping in their water cups right up in the front. So I really don't need to look at them outside of just changing their water. And she's way in the back, so if I'm not or if I'm just changing waters, I may not even notice anything laying eggs.
All right. So I had a question. Well, let me come back to that one.
What happened?
I was trying to say, I was thinking, and I kind of lost a thought. I had it just like a second ago. Chris is saying, she's like, guys are struggling tonight a little bit. It's kind of the mood tonight.
Oh, we were cruising for 30 minutes. Like I thought we'd killing it.
We'll be cruising again. I saw Willie picked up some dunce pythons. What are dunce pythons?
Oh, it's they're also called watar pythons. It's a island right above Timor. They're related to the like Maclot, Savus, the Liasis complex. They kind of look like a hybrid between a Maclot and a Savu. Like they, when they're older, they tend to be a lot more silvers and blonde phases, like a real light. Oh, not quite white. I've seen some almost white, but almost like a lighter phase and a dark phase or phase of gray. And then sometimes you'll get some that are more reds and oranges. When they're babies, they hatch out either silver, orange, or red. I've seen them all sorts of different colors. They're probably one of the most variable out of the Liasis group as far as looks as babies. And then they stay a little bit smaller too. They're kind of in between a Savu and a Maclot as far as size. But yeah.
Do you have those yet?
Yeah, I just picked up a pair from good old Dr. Booth.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, those out of all the species, I pick up pythons from Warren. Yep, that's one phase. They can, like I said, they have like a bunch of different looks, like reds, oranges, silvers, and then sometimes mixes of the two, like almost like a silver brown or a brown look almost. Yeah.
That was from Nick Mutton as Inland Pythons picture. I see some other ones here. This one's pretty cool. This one's like speckled up the side. I like this one a lot.
Yeah, that's an adult animal. That's what they typically look like as adults. They go from that like bright, vibrant colored as babies, and then they mature more into those more freckled look, like similar to a Maclot, except Macs tend to be more yellows and olive colors compared to the Duns seem to be more silvers, blacks, and a little bit of browns.
All right, very cool. Yeah, I never heard of those. Never heard of the Duns python.
Well, I picked up those, and then I picked up 2 female Papuan pythons. Those are some interesting snakes.
Papuas have a really interesting face. They look like an olive python, but with
like
big eyes.
Look like a bulldog.
Yeah, their faces are kind of interesting looking. They got like big heads and big eyes. Their faces are very unique.
Yeah. The female only wants quail or chicken. Try to give her rodents. She want nothing to do with rodents, so might have to try to fool her into rats because we got her as a rat disposal because we have all this overabundance of retired breeder rats we don't know what to do with. So needed to boost the large snake group a little bit. Oh yeah. Yeah, they get big beady eyes too as babies. When they're babies, like I got a farmed hatchling baby, and then I got a yearling or almost 2-year-old, and the baby just has these big beady eyes.
That's why I pulled up that one. That one is very beady. This is an adult here. They still got an interesting look. I mean, I've seen them in person. I remember it says there's an olive python and a papuan, and actually the funny thing is, I was like, wow, the papuan looks so much different, just mainly based off of the face, really. You know, the body, I could see a lot of similarities, but I was like, oh, the face is like, that's, if you're new to them, it's a big difference. They got some pretty big eyes there.
Oh, yeah. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think, so the ones we have in the herpetoculture are typically collected in Sarong, so near that Birdhead Peninsula, like the northeast or northwestern part of Papua. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they range all the way down to like the southern part of Papua. So if that's the case, potentially there's 2 species of them. I just don't think they're going to visually look that much different from each other. Kind of like the green pythons and the white lip pythons and the scrub pythons, how, well, the scrub pythons aren't technically classified as 2 species, but anytime you have a northern and the southern clade of Papua, they're almost always different species. There's very few. It's just the fact they haven't been classified yet. Because I think taxonomies, they go, oh, they don't look any different, so they must not be different in their eyes. But then when they do a molecular analysis on them, they end up being fairly divergent from each other. So
Interesting. I don't know any of this stuff.
Yeah, well, like the way I look at it, Dave, is if it's found science, of course, but if like with this Papua New Guinea stuff, like if there's multiple different species and you have another animal that hasn't been broken up but shares the same range, chances are they're separate species as well. It's just science just hasn't caught up with it yet. Or there's not money going into like taxonomy going to break up all these different python species. A lot of times it's like an accidental thing. They stumble upon it or something like that. Like we're seeing it right now with the Antaresia, with the pygmy not pygmies, the spotteds and stuff like that. Like they have the PNG or the Papuan spotteds, and then they classified them as different than the maculosa that's found in Australia. And then they have the Cape York Peninsula, where those are a separate species. Really, the Papua New Guinea and the Cape York animals genetically are probably nearly identical because there's no difference between scrubs found in that area compared to southerns, and then there's no difference between the carpets found there and then the found near the Cape. The only thing different is like colors is the only variant between the 2.
Huh.
Well, it's funny how the taxonomy works. Like you said, like there's not much money going into it, or they're not like, you know, putting like, you know, sound research, or there's grants funding it. Because you look at like the pythons, like, well, pythons, you know, all their genus is python. And if you look at, you know, the blood pythons, you know, you have let's say the short tail, you know, the Sumatran, and the mainland blood python. You know, these are, you know, separate genus animals. They're different, or sorry, same genus animals. They're different species. But, you know, as far as classification, it's like, okay, a Woma python, same genus, different species. So it's like, okay, all these pythons are just different species. Obviously, a short tail versus a mainland blood python is a lot more closely related to one another than these other pythons.
Right.
You know, but I don't see, there's no integration though. So, I mean, that's kind of how the taxonomy works out for, like, you know, any species of snakes. They don't integrate it, you know, and they're separate, you know, they're separate species. But some of these species are more closely related to one another. So I guess it goes without saying in some of these cases.
Yeah, I find that kind of stuff so interesting. Like the reticulated python group can use some taxonomy work. Some of the Burmese still could use probably some taxonomic work. And then, like I said, there's still Australian stuff that could use a lot of taxonomic work. Like for the longest time, they're worried about like this spotted python clade. But then there's a small little pocket group of species found in Australia that they dub pygmy banded pythons that
have physical traits that are different. On a molecular level are different. As far as like structurally, they have more. They almost look like a hybrid between a Stimson's and a spotted. They have banded looks, kind of like I said, somewhat similar to like a Stimson's kind of would look, but color tones tend to be. I've seen an array, either more silvers and grays, and then I've seen some that are more tans and rusty reds. And they neglected to look at anything to do with that species, but then they were quick to want to lump children's and eastern Stimsons or Stimsons and children's together, and then separate the Cape spotteds and the Papua New Guinea spotteds. 3 to 4 clutches of Dunn's pythons this year. Yeah, I know a few people that's had Dunn's pythons this year. Shoot, I've seen a few people with Papuan python clutches this year. I mean, that was a python I remember for the longest time. It was up there with maybe not quite Bolin status as far as difficult to breed, but you had a lot of people that had issues with breeding those species or that particular species. But I think one dude in Florida produced like 2 clutches. Ryan produced a clutch, and then there was a guy up in Canada who produced 2 clutches. So,
You have any idea what they did differently to get there?
Well, I think a lot of people are either they're getting properly sexed animals, because I do believe when Ryan said that he thinks a lot of people why they had issues, particularly with cannibalism in that species, is because they had either 2 males or, well, I think that's what it was, is they had 2 males and they you put them together and either they don't do anything or they end up killing each other. So I think that might be a little factor in it. Time, being patient with them, because I think some people, if they don't breed it in the first year or 2 and they just don't have luck, they tend to just get rid of it. And I think anytime, especially if you have big adult animals, when you move them a lot of times, especially high-strung, high-stress species, like I think that's why people have issues with like Timor pythons. They're real skittish. They're a skittish species. Once they're established in a collection, though, I mean, they're just as vigorous as a reticulated python. But if you keep moving them around, they tend to just almost shut down emotion. It's like in a little, they get suppressed and they just don't seem to want to like do it, like either eat or they want to hide all the time. They're a lot more reclusive than say something like a retic where they're a lot more outgoing. So I think a lot of people, it's either they're sticking with it, they get properly sexed animals, and I think it's hard to say. I don't know if everyone's cycle feeding, but I do think cycle feeding is a big key to a lot of these Indonesian pythons. They tend to be very, keyed in on cycle feeding more so than cooling. Because I remember years ago, most of the time it was cooling that was the big factor over feeding. When in Indonesia, these pythons probably aren't going to face it. They're not facing as much as far as cooling and heating compared to just like wet, dry seasons where they would get an abundance of food and a drought of no food. So I think that might be another key. I don't know. There could be numerous factors why I think people are having more luck with a lot of these like harder to breed species, and maybe even having more than one too. Like if you have multiple males. Like Flood and Mark Miles with the Bolin's pythons, where they have a couple of males to cycle through or even throw in with the male or female, compared to just having a 1-to-1 ratio.
Well, I think that kind of goes with it though, like whether you're like fasting the animals or cooling them. If you're not so much cooling them, we talked about this I remember last time. But if you're fasting them, that does give them that metabolic like drop, and then when you start feeding them again, you start giving them a metabolic high. And they're definitely, if I like pair a hog nose and then I feed them really heavy, they have all the resources. And that's like I did it with my Mexican beaded lizards. I finally have a gravid one. I mean, it's my second year attempting to breed them, and like I got them as adults and they were younger, and I was like, last year they probably didn't. But this year, I just pretty much kept them at room temp, but during the winter, it did get a little cooler. And they just they just went off feed. And it was like 78, 79 degrees, and they would just not come out. I give them water, and I'm like, man, these things just don't even seem like they're coming out and drinking. I'm like, they have to. So they're doing it pretty sneakily at night sometimes. And, man, they probably weren't very active, I'd say, for about 5 or almost 6 months. And they weren't really eating. And then when it started getting warm again in my, reptile room that they're at, and it started getting more sunlight, and the temperature only raised like a few more degrees. It went from like being around 78 to like 80 to like being like 80 to 82. And then all of a sudden, though, they do the seasonal changes there. There's a little more sunlight, and they start slamming mice. And I just kept them together as a trio, not a one female. Like last year, I had some like false alarms because I'm like, oh, I thought this one grabbed it, but here I was just feeding it a lot, and it just happened to be pretty fat that particular day. But now I showed Crystal. I was like, hey, look at that one. It's her name's Scratch House. I'm like, look at Scratch House soaking. As you can tell, she's grabbing it. She looked at it. She goes, oh, holy shit. She looks like a loaf of like swollen bread, and her back end is like all big. And like it almost looks like it's rounded, and then her tail is like straight. And I was like, well, I got one grabbing, and I didn't really cycle them, but they did go off feed, and they're naturally tuned to the photo period, and the temperature did get a little lower, even though it was like still warm enough for them to eat. They knew that seasonal change, and they went off feed, and then when they resumed feeding, it initiated that.
Yeah, I think it's like with the colubrids, a lot of time I've noticed a few people that I don't know what their success rate is, and I'm kind of curious if you've done that, where instead of a cooling period, you just maybe a cycle. Well, I guess I don't know if colubrids would cycle feed as well if you didn't give them a cool period, because their metabolism would just be higher. But I was always curious about the. Have you ever tried just not cooling to see your success rate?
Here's the thing. I think you could do that, but just by not so much like cooling them, but at least getting your temp a little lower. Let's say keeping them in the mid 70s, that would be successful. I've seen people do that. Like there's one guy was like saying, he goes, I don't brumate my hoggos. I don't brumate my hoggos, and he'd always have pretty good seasons. But then when you asked him what he did, he goes, well, I stopped feeding them like in November, and he goes, and I keep them dark, and I just turn their heat off, and they're like in the low to mid 70s, sometimes upper 70s. And I do that for about 2.5 months. So he is giving them like a seasonal cycle, but it's just a more mild one. But their bodies seem to be in tune to that. I will say I've bred numerous hoggos without cooling them. And generally how I do that is like, I like to cool them to put them on that like an organized, simulated brumated structure, so that I know when to pair them. Because if you're not cooling stuff and you're just like kind of wildly pairing it, especially like stuff like hognose things that can develop egg follicles and ovulate very quickly, you have a very small window, so it's very easy to miss breeding them if you're just kind of guessing. But I'll have female hognose that, let's say it's like a 2.5-year-old female, and she's coming up to like around 180, 190 grams, and she has a really good looking body structure, very mature, and she's coming up to maturity right around springtime. And it's right kind of like in that, close to that proper seasonal site or season where they would breed in the wild. If I have females like that, I've had numerous females where they weren't even cooled, and they were never off feed. And I'll breed them. And then once they get bred, hoggos, I say, are a little easier than a lot of these other species. But once they're bred, it's like, well, that female's body knows that it has sperm. It's like, okay, I have the necessary building blocks to produce eggs. And then you start hitting them with food, and it's like, okay, I have the nutrients. I have all the building blocks I need to develop a clutch. And so then a lot of them do. I'd have a very high success rate with breeding female hoggos that weren't cooled. But if you want to consistently breed them successfully, you have to put them on a simulated, organized cycle, or else you're going to miss, because, organization in a lot of the stuff we do is pretty key.
I know a lot of ball python, at least newer ball python people, you would hear they were always cautious, not cautious, but they would have ball pythons, like newer females coming up, and they wouldn't, because they didn't know their lay day, because they're, like I said, first time females, they wouldn't know what to do. And I just tell them, just cut them off food for a while, purposely put them on a fast, and then hammer them with food. And I think that's why with ball pythons, because ball python people don't typically do that. That's why ball pythons tend to have a year-round season. Because I'm seeing a lot of people getting out of ball pythons because of that. Because they're so conditioned about this, like, I need to feed weekly, bi-weekly, when really you can treat a ball python like a python and it breeds like a python. And it's a miracle. But it's like ball pythons can be just as easy, because I see people jumping out of ball pythons and getting into colubrids because the cooling period. And I go, well, essentially that would just be a fasting period for a python. So I mean, you could fast pythons. The concept that people have that because it's like a narrative that, well, this is what ball python people used to do 20 years ago. This is what we do now. We try to simplify it more and more, when really I don't necessarily think constant feeding, not only that I don't think it's necessarily good, you're just making it more difficult. And then you wonder why, your food bill keeps racking up, and, your feed, these snakes are going throughout the whole year. It's because you're not, I wouldn't even say conditioning them. You're just not putting them in any type of cycle. And I think that's what I've noticed, at least last couple of years. It's either people are getting out because of the quote work that ball pythons are. I go, they're not necessarily work. It's just you want to put way more into them than is necessary. And I don't know. That's just me ranting now. Sorry.
Well, they naturally fast in the wild. Dave, do you do fasting for your ball pythons?
In a sense, yes, because I think Vince said it. Feeding them more just means they're going to shit more. It doesn't necessarily going to affect your breeding season. I've got my ball python females on like a monthly large rat, and I do that through about 9 months, and that's usually enough for them to breed every year.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll do a few smalls if they're like on a hunger strike, but usually I'm offering a frozen prod large. They take it just about every time.
Yeah.
And my females put the weight back on slowly or gradually over the off season, and a lot of them will breed back-to-back years. But mind you, a lot of the stuff I do here, if a girl goes 1 year, I might not try her the next year.
Yeah, that's typically what I do. If I breed them 1 year, I typically give them a year off or something. Unless they just bounce back. Occasionally I have those females that doesn't look like it phased them at all to breed. So, I may or may not try to breed them.
She can handle it.
We have Lisa with a weird one. You guys read that one? You guys are ball python dudes, so.
No,
We got PJ
I don't think I've ever
Creations,
seen
Amanda.
it with a ball python, but I've seen it with ring pythons where, hang on a second, let me make sure I read this right. The ball python ovulate while they were going into shed. Not quite. I've had ring pythons where they, after ovulation, right, I think it was one female during her, when she was gravid, she ended up shedding towards the end of it, or going into a shed. And then I had another female shed. I mean, she went in the shed right afterwards, but I don't think I've ever had and then I've had a few pythons skip sheds, where they just don't shed at all, and they just, ovulate and then go on to lay.
Yeah, unless you missed the ovulation and that was just swelling after the ovulation, and then she's going in the shed.
Right.
I made mistakes like that.
Yeah, Amanda said she had one that shed and then laid eggs the next day, and I'm pretty sure she's talking about a ball python. That seems interesting.
I don't think any of this is exact either, because I mean, I've had female, because I remember for a long time, particularly with miscellaneous pythons, a lot of people would dictate if a female was gravid off of whether they would eat or not. And I would have a few python females that would be eating or would eat throughout being gravid. So I don't think, it's hard to place like, same thing with like another method I remember people used to do all the time was washing females. Like people would get the female would lay the clutch of eggs, and they would take the female off and they would wash the egg scent off of them. And I've noticed it doesn't matter at all. I mean, she'll either will eat or she won't eat. I'll have females that I remember when I used to clean them off that they wouldn't eat. And then when I quit doing it, I would still have, females eat and some wouldn't eat. So what's to say if I would have washed them though, they would still eat. They, I don't know. I think a lot of myths that we used to have like 20 years ago and people still hold on to today,
I agree with that. There's a lot of myths and like things that were said and then just repeated for many years. And then like 20, 30 years, you're hearing this shit and you know it's wrong. And it's just been like, it just kind of was like just an easy explanation or accepted.
Right.
It may have been right at one point, though.
Well, the problem
Yeah.
What I think it is like someone has one problem or have one instance, and then they chalk it up to, well, that just must be how it always is, and then they it just continues on because then they tell someone, and then they just, especially if it's someone who's been doing it for a little while, tell someone newer, and then they tell somebody, and it's like telephone, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I see that happening sometimes, and then some people like sometimes you gotta just take responsibility. If I have a shitty breeding season, most likely it was my fault. Most likely I did something. I was probably lazy or slacking off, and then it's like, all right. Sometimes you gotta admit, sometimes you just suck. Sometimes.
Well,
Some years I suck. That's it.
Dave would be the ultimate example of this. Like, were you breeding?
I suck sometimes.
Hang on.
Man, do I suck
I'm not
sometimes?
calling you lazy. Hang on. Let me explain what I'm going to say. You used to vend a lot of shows. Were you a better breeder then, or were you a better breeder now when you did a lot less shows?
I've admitted it. When I've been traveling too much, I don't cycle as well as I should, and I have bad years because of it. And now that I don't travel as much, my years are significantly better.
Yeah, I remember hearing people through COVID. They said, "Oh, I had the best year ever," because they couldn't go anywhere, so they were constantly in the reptile room. Checking, feeding, cleaning, doing whatever. So they always had eyes on the animals. So yeah.
So I want to make one last comment back on what we were talking about before. So if I have a female ball python lay eggs, after I take the eggs, if she's still bedding down weeks later, like they're in that little spot, I'll take her off and I will really give this tub a good scrub and then throw fresh bedding on it to kind of break that because I don't want her just sitting there like there's eggs and not considering to eat. A lot of times after I do that, I find they do start eating sooner.
I could prove that wrong right now. I have a female wrapped up in the same spot.
You didn't even know if that ball python was grabbing or not.
She's still wrapped up like she's around eggs, and she'll still eat.
That's funny.
I haven't even touched her. I just occasionally throw rodents in there. Yeah.
You like this one. And sometimes like if I if you breed a hognose, like this is like not ultra common, but it's common enough where I've had female hognose that aren't that interested in eating, and they've been out of cool down for a bit. And then once you breed them, like within like after being locked up, like once the male's like detached, the female's like ravenous for food. And I've actually had females try to eat males like during actual breeding while they're actually locked up, where the female tries to eat the male. That's happened to me 3 times. One time the female was successful because like, when I check on them and I see the male locked with the female, I'm expecting she's not going to eat them because they are physically locked up. But never underestimate a hognose and its ability to just do whatever the fuck it wants at that given time. Yeah, Dave?
So, and I'm really glad that we're talking about hognose stuff right now, or at least males getting eaten. But have you ever had a low-end male get eaten, or do you tend to only get your highest-end males eaten?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm usually pairing like higher end males, so I did have some low end ones eaten though. I've had some low end guys eaten, and the biggest way to stop that is just to feed up the female. So, the one thing is like sometimes like when I'm pairing these, it's like, all right, these females aren't like fully loaded with food, and so you are taking a little higher risk. So if you want to lower your risk, and it's hard, like to do all the time. But I mean, it's not impossible. And I even told Crystal, I gotta get back on doing that more. Where it's like, I don't want to miss certain females in the season because I'm like, okay, because think about bank follicles, very quickly. But yeah, a lot of times it's like, I shouldn't even pair until the females are loaded with food because sometimes they're pretty ravenous and just any movement can excite them and they think it's food. I mean, technically the male is sustenance. He is nutritious. So
that'll happen to pythons too. I mean, female gets ravenous and a male moves wrong, and then she just grabs the male. And then you gotta fucking peel the pythons apart.
Is that just blackheads, or do you see that with other species?
I've seen it with savu pythons, Antaresia, white lip pythons have done it, but that was more of like a missex situation more than a male and female action. Ring pythons, I haven't seen it, but I could tell it was going to happen because the female was so, you know, when the python or the snake gives a real fast head movement, you can tell if you had threw a male in that something would have happened. What else? I think I've had ball pythons bite each other because they got excited, but I haven't had a true like rap from a ball python biting another one. So a lot of them will do it. It's just individual based, it seems, or I guess timing of the year. You know, when the female's at the peak of wanting to eat, and seems to be triggered by almost anything.
Yeah, I had it with boas about 2 weeks ago. I had one pair breeding in the room while I was feeding the rest of the room, and then I started hearing thuds. I opened up the cage. I think the male had grabbed onto the female or vice versa. Got them apart. Everything was fine, but at first I didn't really understand what that sound was until I knew what that sound was.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, it's more common with like hognose, and I'm trying to think. There's got to be something that's worse than hognose if the female's trying to eat the males. I mean, not like tarantulas. Olive pythons are really bad.
I've heard stories.
Papuan pythons. I mean, even though I think there are some missex issues, there have been females that will eat males. I remember there was a zoo. I mean, she went through like 3 males. And I mean, they were eating pythons the same size of them too. Like there was one guy on Facebook, on one of the Papuan groups. He had a pair or 2 males even. I don't know. I don't think he ever ended up finding out, or he couldn't because the one ended up getting eaten. But he had 2 Papuan pythons that were virtually the same size, and the one ate the other, and it looked like an accordion. Her body was, because the male or the equally sized animal just accordioned up inside, and she actually was able to digest it and made it through it. Most of the time when something eats something similar size, it ends up killing both animals. But that was probably the one instant where I was like, damn, I can't believe that actually worked out for the other one.
Yeah, I'm surprised something that large. It reminds me of like northern pike in Canada. You ever see that? Where like a northern pike dies trying to eat another one, and it's only like 20% smaller than the other pike. Right. So they're pretty aggressive feeders. I'm surprised, the olive python eating one close to its same size. I mean, I've seen it like with, like let's say like similar. I mean, it's not it's a snake eating a different species of snake, but like these, like king snakes, or indigo snakes eating like a rattlesnake. And then you see them eating the rattlesnake, and the rattlesnake looks like body mass wise, it's almost bigger than the king snake. And then the king snake is just kind of like swallowing it, and it looks like it's not really. Yeah, Cal Kings, Lisa just mentioned. Like, it's pretty insane. Some of the snakes they can stomach. So what did olive python do? Like shit, like fucking for a month.
Cal Kim was a good one. I didn't think about Cal King's spectacles. I think anything king snake, pretty much.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of Cal Kings, eating it's like rattlesnakes and speckled kings, and then indigo snakes, like the Texas indigo snakes. I read a short bit, and it may have been it was published somewhere, and it may have been on a podcast. I forget where I seen or heard it, but this lady that was studying them was talking about how if you go to where there's a lot of eastern indigos, you can't really find many rattlesnakes. But as soon as you start getting the sparse range of the Texas indigos and you don't really see them, you start seeing more rattlesnakes.
Oh yeah. Anacondas, I know they were known cannibalizing each other. You'll see I've seen a lot of videos, a lot of in the wild anyways, but you never hear too many of it in captivity as far as I know, outside of sometimes the mother eating some of the offspring, but I don't think I've heard too many adult females eating adult males. But in the wild, I hear about it quite a bit.
Well, food's probably a little more scarce in the wild, a little more desperate.
Right. Especially a mating ball. If you got a bunch of males, I mean, not all of them are going to take. So You get the sacrificial lamb of the group or something.
Who's gonna notice, man? One's got to go.
Right.
That's good nutrition too, on the spot.
So-
Especially for a female developing follicles.
So, Junior, back to your females eating your males. When your female eats your male, does she normally ovulate, or does she normally not ovulate that season?
It doesn't really seem to matter. Sometimes they have a hard time digesting the males, though. I really prefer them to never eat a male. I don't lose too many, although I've had kind of a bad streak in the past. Full year, or let's say year plus a month, I've lost. I'm trying to think, 3 males. In a little over a year period, which is a lot. Because normally in like a year period, I'm losing like 1 or none. So this is like the most. I did do quite a few pairings. I'd say the one problem is I kind of like scattered my breeding season. So I'm not as kind of like you're saying, like during COVID, when you're more hands on and you're down in the reptile room like all day, and you're just really out of the room when you're sleeping, and then maybe even wake up in the middle of your sleep to check on everything. When I'm like full focused and I'm hardcore, like this is all I'm doing, my success rate is definitely higher. And since I kind of have stole some babies from the previous season, and I've been spacing out my pairings, it's like, well, I'm not as concentrated. And also now I have 2 separate breeding rooms. And actually 3, because I split up some of my stuff in different rooms. Then I have my small quarantine section. So I have all these different areas, and I'm breeding over a longer stretch of period, and maybe not as many hog nose, all at once, but I'm scattering it. So it's making it harder for me to keep an eye on things. But the big thing is too, it's it's really just having a well-fed. If I have a female and she's fully loaded with food, the likelihood of her trying to eat a male, basically you want to fill her up with food where it's to the point where it's all right, she really couldn't fit 40, 50 grams more food in her. So then that way it'd be very hard for her to even eat a male. It makes no sense. And then a lot of times too, once you feed them a lot and they're resting and you go to pair them the next day, they're just not in the same kind of reactive state to food because they're already digesting. And then they're in a period state of sleep, because after snakes eat, they generally rest for the majority of the day, 20 hours a day while they're digesting. And one of the topics was supposed to be husbandry. That's what's on the thing. I think we kind of talked about that.
All time. I think this has all been one big husbandry conversation.
It is. This is husbandry. I mean, this is all care for animals and stuff, and managing. I mean, it's loose. I would say the one thing though, and I say it's universal, and I think it's a pretty easy topic to cover. It's I think air circulation and fresh, clean air is ultra important. Stagnant air, certain species may handle a little better, species that hang out in fissures and burrows the majority of the time. But overall, fresh, clean water, good circulation, and the ventilation, those are some of the most important things, alongside clean enclosures.
All
right. That sounds like common sense to me.
Right.
Yeah, it is common sense.
So, I guess. So I was going to do the Colorado show that's coming up in, I don't know, the AARP one. But they've recently passed the law where it's a foot to foot as far as enclosure size for all. I think it was all snakes. I don't think it was lizards were involved. I think for snakes it was foot to foot. Do you think that's something that might get adopted more in other states?
Okay.
I heard that.
Yeah, it did. I heard about that. I forgot about that, William. It's really whoever pushed that legislation. And it's if you start to see it, I guess, in another state, then it's probably wise to see that that's going to follow suit and they're going to try to do it in other states. But I think they got to try to appeal to these states and try to find a way to try to push that legislation through, which is going to take some time. I mean, I don't think in some cases it's necessarily it kind of sounds like it has good intentions, but it's probably something that's being pushed more by PETA, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I do believe they said it was the one PETA individual in the room was the loudest. So I think that was the one from what I heard, was the one they decided to go with as far as, I guess, the ruling or whatever it was?
Well, PETA does spend like tens of millions of dollars, or I think hundreds of millions of dollars, trying to push legislation. So I think every now and then they throw them a bone and they're like, all right, yeah, we'll pass this one. And this one is like more sensical. It's like, all right, it sounds like you're, appealing to better enclosures. I think for most species, it's not going to be very hard for people. They're already kind of doing that.
Right.
Maybe some commercial reptile shops might have a little harder time. But I really, from what I understood and read, I was like, this doesn't really look like it's going to really affect anybody. It looks like most people are already kind of doing this.
From my understanding, it's mainly it sounds so bad, but it was mainly the ball python community. Like, I was listening to a podcast of some Colorado folks who were talking about it. And boy, talk about doom and gloom. It sounded like absolute, you could just tell the tone was very, very down because of it. Well, because let's face it, if you kept a ball python foot to foot enclosure, it'd be at least a 4-foot cage, or one of the ARS or Freedom Breeder rollout cages, kind of what people keep boas in, would probably be an equivalent size, I guess, is what they're looking for. So something like that, or a cage. But
no, you're right. Yeah, because like these racks that all these big ball python breeders are using, but even the CB70s aren't up to par for your 3.5, 4 foot females. I mean, it's close, but it's not what they're requiring.
No, you know what? Honestly, when you brought this topic up and you brought up going to the show out there, I thought you were going to go in the direction of, is it going to be a bad show with the new regulations? Will breeders be too scared in Colorado to buy new animals, knowing these laws are coming up?
that's essentially why I'm kind of debating about trying to switch this show out with Tennessee. And I think it depends too on the size of your collection, because if you have a certain size collection, you have to get yourself permitted. What is it?
I thought it was 200. I
like
thought
200,
that would be over
250. But if you're below that, then I guess it doesn't matter because no one has to come in and look at anything. I guess I don't know if that's the exact rule or the exact law.
I believe people that have collections that are already that size have already put in for the permit that they needed to have that. But now essentially their address is in the database, so I'm sure that it'll get enforced with them first, and then it'll go down from there. But I've tried having the conversations. I find that a lot of people in Colorado are afraid to talk about it because they feel like, they're being watched. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but basically the requirements, I mean, if they are pushing that, it's like no ball python breeder will be able to do that because the CB70s are 33 inches. So essentially, if you have a 4-foot ball python, it's like, all right, you need a boa rack. So now everybody would have to buy all boa racks, like the smaller boa tubs, for 100% of their ball pythons.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, if it's a over under 200 animals in your collection, I could see people just lowering the amount of animals they have in their collection so they're in the clear. I mean, that'd be their only option, honestly.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like a lot of them are doing too. I mean, they're just lessening the collection. So, I mean, if you truly like it, you'll learn to adapt to stuff like that. I mean, or like I said, I think they're still like this. I don't think it goes into effect till 2027. So you don't never know what could happen by that time frame. But I think most people, you rather be ready for it than not type of situation.
Imagine you scale down and you get all boa racks, and then at the very end, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're not passing that. You're fine." You motherfuckers.
Well, I think too, and that's what made that show kind of iffy for me too, is because it's happening fairly close to when that law is supposed to, not go in effect, but when it was announced. And you could tell there was a lot of fear, at least in the few people I've heard. So it was kind of one of those I don't know if I want to even take the chance of going to a show like that, because because I work with enough species where I'd probably be okay, but then I don't know. I think most people keep even some of the carpets and the white lips and stuff like that. They tend to still keeping them in something probably that's still would be considered a little too small or something. Bigger than what most ball python people keep, but still a little bit smaller than would probably be appropriate by their new rule or whatever. So either way, I'm not quite sure I would do all that well out there because of it, regardless if I'm diverse or not.
Yeah, could be overthinking it because I'm overthinking it myself. But also, again, like I do think that news cycles affect people's buy-ins. We see it in the stock market. I do think that the buzz around town with some of the local breeders at these shows might not be, I need to expand. It's probably going to be the opposite. So, general public, I still think your sales are going to be just fine in the stuff you work with. The vendor money, I think, is going to be the difference at that show.
Right. More pet stuff.
Yeah. Well, not even pet stuff. I mean, a scrub is a pet to the right person. A white lip's a pet to the right person. Not so much that, just, vendors may take a little money home at the end of the day where sometimes they might be a little more interested in spending it.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. But and it's like, it's far enough away. It's like, because on the same day, ARP's doing the Tennessee show that's a lot closer. It's like 5 hours away compared to like 11 or 12 hours away. So,
well, what's really funny about that? So next weekend, there's a Show Me Reptile show in Colorado Springs, and they have a Nashville show the same weekend. And I've been kind of doing the him and ha back and forth. Nashville used to be pretty good to me. It's not as good as it used to be. And the tables are going to cost a little more at that show than the Show Me show in Colorado. But again, I'm afraid I'm going to drive 12 hours to Colorado and the vibe's not going to be the best. I might be worth just taking the risk going to Nashville that weekend. I didn't know ARP had the same deal where they had a show in both towns the same weekend.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
So I'm debating. I'm messaging them now though. I emailed them. I was like, can I just, because I already paid for the Colorado table, and I kind of, if I can, I'd like to switch them.
I'm sure that honestly, well, I can't say honestly, but I'm sure they'd make it work if they can. I know that their Colorado show is on high demand, and there would probably be somebody willing to fill your tables.
Right. Yeah, I figured. I didn't think it'd be a problem. I don't know how their Tennessee show went, so I don't know if that's a. I know it's in the old what is it? The Exotic Pet Expo where they used to have the show. Do they have both rooms open?
No, it's half the size. So it's pretty much the newer half they started using. That takes up that. The show wasn't bad. The crowd was good. I want to say that was a summer show, like an early summer show, and I find it hard to judge.
I remember talking to Jessica about that. She was really excited for the Tennessee show, and I said Kansas you might get away with it being. I think it was like a few weeks before the Tennessee show. But I was like, Kansas, I mean, there's not as much to do. But Tennessee, man, when it's nice outside, I think the last thing people are going to want to do is go to a reptile show, in my opinion. Especially Tennessee being a party town.
Couldn't agree more. Tennessee is so much more expensive now. Like when we used to go there, there'd be $80 rooms. It's like $150 to $200 room all over that place, even the shitty hotels.
About Airbnb, man.
I know. I'm never pre-planned for this kind of thing. I got to look into that next time.
Yeah, Dave goes down to the show, fully loaded, sets up, and then goes looks for a hotel with a hotel.
Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't work out for me.
Well, that's why you're adapting. Man. You'll sleep in your car.
Yeah, no. Hey, Junior, you got to mute yours to take care of the echo, right?
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Yeah, so I think Junior's little room he's in, when you talk, Will, it must echo through the room because it sounds like a Rick and Morty episode.
Oh, that bad, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, you got to quit being on drugs, Dave. That's the problem. You're tweaking.
Barely on drugs, buddy. Barely on drugs. You couldn't hear it? Was it just me? Bullshit.
Oh, come on. Oh, so random question. Oh, what is this? Oh, the ARP and was it Fredericksburg, Virginia next weekend? Yeah, I was debating about doing that show. I've always wanted to go up more towards the Northeast, but I don't know.
I didn't want to take the trip because it was such a long drive. Chad's going to be at that show. He'll report back to me how it goes, and I'll think about the next one. But again, these are like new shows in new areas right on the end of summer, and you know, it's really tough to judge a show in the summertime. Even if it's their
Yeah.
first show, it's very, people just are not at the shows in the summertime like they are in the fall, winter, and even the spring.
Quick question. Yeah, I don't even know if I asked Junior this, and he went to Daytona. How was Daytona? How did people do out there? Do you know?
It's funny from what I heard from Dave. It was like all over the place. Like a bunch of people made like $5, and then one guy was sold like $30,000 in corn snakes. So they wouldn't even sell like a fucking
I didn't say
1,000 corn snakes for
$5.
30 each.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Dave, I was debating because I keep hearing, and I know Wayne's old too, man. So I keep hearing that
He's going to listen to this. Keep that in mind.
What?
Oh, no, I
Yeah,
just
you're
said
not getting a
Wayne's
table
listening.
anymore, dude. I'm sorry, your table's gone.
Table's gone.
Table's gone.
Table's gone?
Yeah. As soon as you said Wayne Hill's old, it's like as soon as he hears that, boom. You're
Does he
Yeah,
actually
sorry.
listen to this kind of stuff, though?
That was fine. So start where you left off when you said Wayne Hill is old. Go from there, because I didn't hear the last part.
Well, either way, like I keep hearing that I know we've been hearing it for years, but I heard they're not going to.
You're going dark with it, buddy.
Doesn't want any more reptile shows there, so even when Wayne Hill's gone, they're not going to allow anyone else there. So I've been hardcore debating. I think next year I might try to vend Daytona, just to say I did it. I don't know.
Well, you are right. I do believe Wayne Hill is the only guy that'll have a show in that venue, and when he decides to stop, it's over. It could always be the last Daytona. If you have an opportunity to go down, I think you should. I think rare stuff like you have would do very well down there. The crowd is usually decent, but it's just like any other show.
Right.
Some vendors do good and some vendors do bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have interesting stuff. So I think you do pretty good, especially if you kind of like promoted yourself and you're, you know, a lot of people are going to want to
It's always
pick something
that
up from you that happen in that area.
Yeah.
And Wayne Hill, he actually was like, he looked like pretty functional. So I think the show's going to go on for a while. I was like, oh, he looks like he's pretty good. You know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, when you start getting up there in age, you know, you'll go from looking really good to just going downhill one year.
Yeah, true. I mean, yeah, he's been old for a minute. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I'm not getting a table now either, so fuck it.
Yeah. We're never going to be able to get another senior citizen on the show the way Will's talking right now.
Sure. Well, that's, I mean, it happens, man. You got like, even for us younger guys, you know, you don't know what's going to happen, and you know, you want to get stuff done. You know, let's say like, you know, I want to get an interview with Norm Dam versus like, I'll do it in like 3 years, and then, you know, watch, you know, he's gonna be like 88. You know, you're kind of pushing your luck there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like with Dave and
Because
Tracy
his
Parker.
memory?
It's like they keep making these books, and we keep hearing about this short tail or blood python book, and it's like you're not getting any younger. When is this book coming out? So,
Damn, you guys are really dark tonight. Like,
Well,
none
I
of these
mean,
people are ever going to come on our podcast now.
Hey, it's the way life goes. Unfortunately, we're not.
You're
even
like, Dan, you're going to die
far.
before I get my book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking about reptiles and stuff, and it's like everything has like, you know, its time. You know, beaded lizards apparently live for like ever. There's Fernando that's like 65 years old, and he's like doesn't even look aged. You know, and then you have stuff like, you know, day geckos. They don't live terribly long. Bearded dragons are like 10, 12 years. And, you know, then you have pythons and boas 30, 40 years. And you have humans like 70s, 80s. You're doing pretty good.
Well, did you see that zoo that recently had, 90-year-old Galapagos tortoise have her first clutch of eggs? I think it was something like that. I was like,
As long as she's ready.
When they're in their
She's
prime.
ready. She's mature.
yeah, that's for what, halfway through their life? Maybe. Something like that.
Yeah, respect for him, man. Like, something you'll buy now that you'll never be old enough to breed.
Right. Well, I think most people breed them at 20. I think 20 years or 25 years is usually the breeding age from what I was told. So.
Great. I can get one.
I just don't think the zoo's scared to try. I guess they just 1 year, just that female cycled, and you know, they tend to keep a lot of their big tortoises together in herds, so it was probably just a matter of time before, you know. And you never know, like that female was probably bounced around from zoo to zoo, and she just stayed at the zoo long enough to be bred with something. I don't know.
I've got Polaroids from the Madison, Wisconsin Zoo, God knows, 20 years ago. And like literally the Galapagos started having sex and like everybody in the zoo just happened to be there and they all crowded, and as soon as it was over, they got the fuck out. It was over. Nobody cared anymore. But it was beautiful to see it, man. Like I don't know how common that is, but it was cool.
Mark O'Shea's new edition of Papua New Guinea. I don't think I've seen that one yet. No, I'm excited for. Well, I'm fairly excited for it. I don't know, because I've been hearing rumor mills of a bunch of stuff. Like they were wanting to look into liasis now. Like I think they're finally going to look into the water pythons and probably want to split them up the same way. Even though I don't think that's necessarily how that works for them. I don't know, because like I think the Queensland and the Papua New Guinea waters are the same, and then Northern Territory water pythons, where you hear that infamous fog dam, those I believe are separate species. If I'm not mistaken, I think those animals are more genetically related to Macklot pythons than they are to Queensland water pythons, if I'm not mistaken. But they look like water pythons. They don't look hardly any different. So
it seems like Mark O'Shea, he's written quite a few books. I feel like there's always like,
I think
he's doing.
I think he did that book. 600. It was like 600 species of snakes or something. It was just this big Bible of a book of just most of the species I've never even heard of. I'm just like, wow. And then you look at it and you go, man, look at all these cool species, and all of them are like worm experts, or they specialize in eating worms, snakes, tadpoles, snails. All these odd food items that are not as readily available.
You remember I used to go to I seen him there like maybe 2 or 3 times. I used to go to the Tinley show.
Which one?
Mark O'Shea. He used to go to some of the Tinley shows.
Did he?
Yeah, I seen him there like at least twice. I was probably like 22, 23, 24.
Man, was it him? You sure you're not mixing him up with
This is Mark O'Shea. He had red hair. It was Mark O'Shea. I know what he looks like.
Okay.
It was definitely him.
So this might be a random question. You think Mark O'Shea would want to come on and do a podcast with us?
He's done one before.
Really?
He did one with it wasn't even a podcast, it was just a YouTube interview that Dan Malari did. He was talking about the spotted pythons. I'm sure he would if you asked him.
All right.
He likes.
Yeah, we got a good lead. We got
a lead?
No, that's a good lead. We should, we should Mark O'Shea.
Yeah.
I mean, again, man, he's like, I swear, he was at a couple Tinleys. It was interesting because I remember seeing him walking around. I'm like, oh, that's,
I personally, with me, I think it would be really cool to do a podcast where you have all these old timers, like you have Trumbauer, what were some other good ones? There was like Crutchfield would have been good. Eugene would be cool. If you could get Dave on or Trace, that'd be awesome. But if you're not 70 years old, you can't come into the group. But I think that would be interesting.
And then what about young guys? It was a good interview if you can't be, if nobody.
What's going on? You can't come in. Yeah, I'd like to listen to all those guys have a conversation. I think that'd be.
Hey, William, can I tell you something?
Yes.
So if you came to Daytona this past time, you would have been invited up to a private party in Craig Trumbauer's room where Keith McPeak and Casey Lasik were hanging out telling stories all night.
He'd be another one too. Casey would be cool. Yeah.
It's a hard sell. I did talk to Keith McPeak, and I'm going to probably plan something with him in the next week or so, which is going to be kind of cool. I was going to go one-on-one, but I might have to invite you on with me.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to talk. Especially his python or blood python career he had for, at least 20, probably close to 20 years he had with the short tails and stuff. He got out of them as soon as the craze, I don't even know if it was a craze, but when a lot of the morphs start coming, that's when he kind of start petering out. But he's known for a lot of his Borneo stuff and a lot of his boas. Dude's bred a lot of cool stuff. So, there's so many of those old school guys. I'd love Casey would be great. If you're an Australian python lover or Australian animal lover, because he's known for his shinglebacks as well,
So I will say, now the joke's on me. I did miss the night where Casey Lasik told all his best stories.
God damn it,
Dennis
Dave.
Dennis McNamara was there, and I chose drinking on the beach over something that I could have probably never have again in my life.
Oh, you son of a
So
bitch.
I'm gonna literally have to talk to Dennis and hear all the stories, just because they're all lost in that room now, man. And I heard it was a great time.
Son of a bitch.
Dennis will probably be like, "Oh yeah, I forgot." He's like,
Dennis never forgets.
All right. Well, he's good to ask. I remember because actually when I was going down there, Brent sent me some pictures of old hypo hognose. I could tell they're from Casey Lazick because I remember seeing them on his website because he had some nice red phase like hypomelanistic, Richard Evans line hypomelanistic hognose. And he sent me pictures of it. He goes, I'm talking to Casey right now. So yeah, Casey's like, I remember he's the first one to have the Centurion carpets, and I think Knobtails he brought in a lot of the original ones.
Yeah. No, he was known for a lot of that crazy stuff. Yeah, Angolan pythons. He had, I think, the first wild collected Angolan pythons, him and some zoos.
Yeah,
Casey, I don't know. He was there hanging out at Daytona. I think he'd probably be somebody that would do a podcast.
He's real. I don't know. He's like real shy, man. From what he loves. He'll talk to anyone, but when it comes to podcasts, he's just real. I don't know. Shuts down. He doesn't really want to talk on podcasts for whatever reason.
I don't blame people for that. And some of the older guys, the stories back then are a little different now. There is some things that are almost incriminating in certain conversations.
Yeah. Especially Casey, man. That.
Hey, watch go easy on that, man. You're saying
saying
incriminating shit now.
I'm not saying
that is one more person who's not going to do a podcast with us because you're just going on.
No. I'm not saying he did, but I can see why though. I'm just elaborating. I can see why someone like him wouldn't want to, because that or people are always curious on, well, how did you get them? And people are always wanting to pressure and ask and, poke around when they probably shouldn't be. So, but I don't know. Matter of fact, I had someone from Australia message me about white lips and ball pythons. That was interesting. He goes, how is this worded? Would you be interested in shipping them, or do you think you could send these to his mom's zoo or something like that? His mom.
Now you're incriminating yourself, buddy. You got to learn what to say and not say in a podcast.
Yeah, well, it's not
Tell
like
me
I'm
about
going
you
to
sending
do
ball
it.
pythons to Australia.
Well, it's not that I'm going to do it. I'm just saying. It was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, financially interesting.
I was just like, is this how it usually goes?
Yeah.
I would just be like, hey, dear Fish and Wildlife, stop wasting my fucking time. Leave me alone. It's like, I get it. You're trying to do, but whatever. It's like, come on. I just hey, I got so many messages to get back to. It's like, shut the fuck up, please.
Right. I like playing with them a little bit more, like starting to poke around and ask questions and stuff like that. I don't know.
You should just give them Fish and Wildlife and be like, I know some guys that like to commit a bunch of wildlife crimes. Just give them like the Florida Fish and Wildlife to give them the FWC.
Right. But yeah. I don't know. Like I said though, I think it'd be cool if you had a podcast where you just had all these old timers.
That would be cool. You get somebody set it up, like a younger person, and then they set up, and then they just leave, and they let the old timers
put them
talk.
all in here. Kind of like what they do with Dave's show. Someone moderates in the background, and then just lets all the old timers just go at it and talk tell the stories they want to tell, and I don't know. I think it'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah. So half my guests are Craig Trumbauer and Rich Eiley, and I bring out lots of older gentlemen, guys, man. Yeah, it's we don't ever have old guests on. They're not. Yeah. It's hard to get them all together at the same time. You know what I mean? Technology's a real motherfucker. You can only do so much.
Right. And I've never talked to anybody busier than a retired person. Every fucking person that I know that's retired, dude, has a full schedule made up of fucking fake shit they have to do that doesn't even have to be done. Because once you start asking them what you need to do, They start filling it in with anything. Oh, I got to mow my lawn. It's fucking grass. You're going to die in about 7 years. You want to go out there and mow your fucking grass? I got to take out the trash. I got to do this. It's like, dude, relax a bit.
Well, they get more meticulous. Like when they go out, like my dad's retired. He goes out to stores and he'll just stand there, and he actually enjoys going out to grocery shop because he just, I don't know if he just takes it all in or what, but I don't know. They seem to like the little things.
Little adventures. Some of them, though, aren't. The one was like, I got to mow my lawn, and I got to, weed eat. And I'm like, oh, my God. I'm like, that's what's waiting
for you. Is that
what
they're telling you, or why they're not wanting to come onto the podcast?
No, it was actually, I'll tell you the story. He wouldn't even care, I don't think. It was Norm Dam when he was talking about how he might not be able to make it to the Tinley show. And I asked him what he had to do. And he started giving me, I started laughing. I was like, you fucking shitting me? And the one was like, yeah, I got to cut my grass. I got to do this. I'm like, you can get that all wrapped up. I was like, even if you don't get to it, the grass might be like an inch longer when you get back. Maybe even if that, a quarter, a half. It's just do it later. It's like, man, you're retired and your people and your friends want to see you at an expo. It's like, you're not busy. Come on.
Well, that might be the only way to do a lot of these old school guys we were talking about is going to some of these expos and just putting a microphone in the center of the room or something like that.
That would be good. Just go right up to them, make it easy for them, and just be like, hey, I would like that.
This here, and I'm going to leave.
The microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think cornering an old guy at a show with a microphone has ever gone wrong.
Well,
no, it hasn't. Not yet.
Afterwards, not scaring them at the show. Like you said, they went into the hotel room and they had their little story time. And be like, hey, you know who another guy was, Jeff Hartwig. He, my God, that dude had so many stories. We were up at the St. Louis NRBC show, and boy, he was going on and on about all these stories about like how because he was a pole vaulter and he went to Australia for the Olympics, and he ended up putting his hands on the first ever wild collected rough scale python. I go, this is cooler than 90% of the stories I hear on podcasts. You would do great. I was like, I don't know. And you could tell they were excited to tell these stories too. I go, I guess it's just the being on camera or, being live in front of a bunch of people or something like that.
Yeah, then it feels a little like, it's like not in the moment because you're making the moment and it's scheduled. So I could see it too. Even for like some of like the good podcasts we do with one another, it's like, it usually starts to, it takes like a little while to get good. It's not like, immediate. And so you need to kind of get comfortable and settled into it and everything. And, then you got to start getting to share their stories and stuff and get caught up in the stories. And that's when things start to get good.
Yeah, we can't all have like Trumbauers and stuff. That guy, he can tell some stories. My God. You guys would get him going and he would just coast. He would take over the whole show and just talk.
He may never come on the podcast again now because of you guys. I'm just going to put it out there. We may have lost that entire generation, buddy. The whole boomer generation is never going to do another podcast with us.
Oh, God. Come on now.
Now they're going to listen to this one. And we just said old. I think most people, I don't know. I think they're fine.
You're probably right. I don't think they're going to listen to this one.
You're getting to that age where now people are looking at you as you're the old guy.
Yeah, I'm starting to get there. I was a young guy forever. Now I'm kind of getting old. Shit, most of the people in my Hognose friend groups, I'm the old guy because they're all like 25, 26, 27, 29, and I'm 38. So yeah, I'm the old.
You've been doing it for so long too.
Yeah, I mean that's a good cool thing is I started really really young, and so again that's like it shows you like having time in. Of course, with anything you're doing is very beneficial and very helpful. And like shit, I've been at this for a while, but still, it's like there's like a lot of things I'd like to do to get accomplished, and it's like I better get working on it because it's like I'm not getting any younger. 2 more years and I'm 40, which is weird. Yeah, I don't really feel like I'm 40, but whatever.
Yeah,
so, quick question: Would you both be interested in a Papua New Guinea trip next year? Just throwing it out.
I'd be interested, but I'm probably not going to go because of my schedule. I'm already like Norm Dam. I got to mow my lawn. Actually, I don't do that. I got to take care of Hognose, but Papua New Guinea would be pretty cool. Just let me know the time, and it's like maybe I try to make it work. I would like to do. I still want to travel and do some like in-person interviews with like old school people like Richard Evans. Kind of the guy that launched the whole entire hognose community. I had a podcast with him, and I'd like to talk to him again in person, do some other interviews and stuff like that, get these people's stories before even like Norm Dan. Norm Dan's he's like 86 now, and he was part of one of the first people that helped form NOAA, the Northeastern Ohio Association of Herpetoculture. And that was like the beginning of like reptile shows. Those had some the first reptile shows formed in the Columbus, Ohio, at the old armory, the Ohio Reptile Show.
I've been wanting you to get Norm on since we started doing this. I think Norm would be a great guy for this.
Yeah, I gotta get him. Either I gotta see if he wants to do a podcast or just an in-person interview. Norm's definitely one of those people too. I think he's probably a little skeptical about doing like a podcast and everything. But yeah, he has a lot of stories and he has a lot of history. And he's told stories too. He's when he first got into snakes, and it's like the late 60s. He goes, barely anybody was breeding snakes. He goes, most people didn't want baby snakes because they're why would we want a baby? You got to raise it up. They wanted it as an adult. They wanted big adults. And he goes, and nobody was really even breeding them. They were kind of just hobbyists that kept them in terrariums and stuff. And he goes, and then, people were, working on that, but it was pretty limited. And then it caught on. And, then you hear the stories too of the first Daytona shows, which were actually in Orlando. And the first ones, they weren't even an expo. They were at hotels, and it was basically a meetup for reptile people. And they kept all the animals in their rooms, and they would just go to each other's rooms to see what each one had. And they were pretty much all imports. They had shingleback skinks, different tortoise species, radiated tortoises, and I'm sure among a lot of other species. And, that was the kind of the forming and founding years.
Right. Yeah, I would hear stories about who was it? Richard Ross or something would talk about how he would get collectors and have collectors go find different different. I think it was a boa species, and they would bring them, and it was one of those where the males stayed quite a bit smaller than the females, but they would only bring them these adult females, and never would end up finding these males. Because the collectors just assumed, they just want these big adults and stuff. So they would always bypass these smaller males. And then he went out there and actually was finding the males himself. And he was like, no, I want these too, not just the big females. So yeah, even collectors, it seemed like back then, were more inclined to get big adults than they were smaller babies. But now it's gone in reverse. Now now since we're more interested in breeding, it seems to be more helpful to get as small as you can imports and raise them up compared to just getting these big wild.
Definitely, yeah.
Tend to not do that well.
Oh, Lisa said that Australia has wild corns too, so corn snakes are they let them out and they're established as parts of Australia. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
it makes sense that they could do good in certain parts.
Oh yeah, there was someone posted a picture. It was one of the animal rescue or relocators or something. They went to someone's porch and they just panned this video up to someone's porch, and it's this big 50 kilo, 13-foot albino Burmese python just right there on their porch.
Yeah, that doesn't help the hobbyist community when people spot that shit.
Oh yeah,
not a big help.
Corn snake thing is legit though. I had a buddy from Australia probably 4 or 5 years ago send me a picture from a friend's house. And they found an albino in their yard, and it was the biggest, beefiest albino you've ever seen.
Yeah,
there's so many little lizard species out there. They're probably just snacking all fucking day long, and all the native lizards. Although cats are far worse. The cats out there are extremely detrimental. They said I think they made 125 species go extinct in Australia so far. Small species, feral cats, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's up there. Cane toads and cats are some of the worst, at least when it comes out.
Yeah, and then they have rats and weasels too, and opossums, and they're real bad.
Yeah. Yep. From what I heard, I heard some species are starting to adapt to the cane toads, as far as they're not looking at them as a prey source. At least that's what I heard. I heard
Yeah,
I don't
I mean,
know
it
if
makes
it's-
sense. Animals are going to evolve to like, if they're getting sick or dying, and some species, like let's say toads aren't their exact prey item, but some of them are discerning them as prey. And then, the ones that aren't are passing on their genes, or ones that do survive, and have some pattern recognition learning abilities, know not to mess with them again. So it makes sense. And that would be good news if that's what's happening.
It may not be quick enough though with some stuff though, because
Yeah, true.
This is what I heard. And it's still probably anecdotal. It might just been because I mean we even see this in captivity where even within the same female where one you could have one clutch the baby's established real easy or hardly have any trouble at all, and you could have the following year another clutch that are absolutely horrible. Matter of fact, Casey Lazick was saying that about the pygmy pythons. He said his first ever clutch he had of them, they established easy and didn't have a problem with them. And then the next year he bred them, I believe, is when they were just hell. They just wouldn't establish very well.
So, little off topic. So we were talking about boa constrictors the other day and boa mutations. Me and my friend Blake, and we were talking about the super Key West boa that in some litters, when super keys are being born, they've already broken out of the embryonic sac inside mom, where the entire litter will be alive except for the super keys. One of the suspicions on why this might be happening is the mutation might have a thinner membrane or a thinner ovarian sac, and maybe that's why they're breaking out inside. Do you think a mutation in a animal would change the sac formation? I guess is the way of saying it.
It sounds like a mutation that is
They are viable sometimes. They're not always viable.
Yeah,
They are
I know what you're
viable
saying. I'm
sometimes.
trying to think of a way to explain it. It sounds like a mutation that is kind of like disrupting the proper development. Like, so they're developing a little differently. So it might be that thinner sac that they're more likely, but it sounds like that they're hatching essentially from that sac prematurely sometimes. So they might be developing differently. So I think it's a developmental thing. Because I've seen certain mutations, like even in hog, like the cinnamon gene is one. Some of the high expression ones seem to have like a little bit of issues. And they can sometimes seem to hatch out and they didn't develop their yolk sac properly, even though the other babies have. And I've seen mutations too, like let's say like, the funny thing is, it's like, let's look at like the super motley that's like almost always lethal, but every now and then people do get them. And you can see that the animal body structure is very different. So they're going to also develop differently based on that. But if it's a mutation that overall looks okay, I mean, it could still interfere with how the rate they develop. So they might develop just slightly differently. And that slight difference is making them more susceptible or more sensitive to possibly hatching from that sac early and coming out prematurely.
So the only thing that I can think of I wouldn't even consider it that similar, but the only thing that kind of reminds me of, and this seems more like a keeper problem than the potential of snake or mutation. But I remember hearing for a while that the ghost retic, anytime they would cut a ghost egg, they're more inclined to shoot out of the egg prematurely than like the hets or the non-ghost animals. But again, they're cutting the eggs, and if you didn't cut them, they'd probably be okay. But for whatever reason, when you do cut them, I don't know, they spook themselves or something happens where they just tend to want to shoot out sooner. I don't know what would cause.
I've had that with pied ball pythons.
Huh?
Pied ball pythons, in my opinion, if you cut early, I find that pieds tend to come out too soon before they have reabsorbed everything, organs still hanging behind them. That's happened with me in the past when I did cut. It wasn't uncommon for that type of pieds and made me stop cutting pied clutches.
Okay.
I remember hearing about pies. Sometimes people are having ones with developmental issues or deformities, or even ones with like their some of their important organs on the outside of their body and these like extreme deformities. But I don't know if outcrossing or if they're just more susceptible to these issues due to, let's say, like if the female has a, I don't know, I wouldn't think that they'd have a high bacterial level because ball pythons are pretty tolerant to that kind of stuff. But do you guys have any experience or know anything about that? Like the pies having those issues? Like I've heard of ones hatching and they have their organs like on the outside of their body, or they die in the egg. And that's interesting that cutting the egg that they seem like they instinctively want to come out sooner.
Yeah. So personally, and I've had years where we've produced a lot of pies. I've never had that happen even once, I don't think.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So healthy pies then. All right.
Kind of.
I remember the only thing I ever would hear about pies is fertility issue. Not fertility, like females, visual pied females not laying very consistently. But I haven't had real problem. They don't have you. But my ball pythons aren't that big, so I don't typically have gigantic clutches. But
I know in the days when Pete was mass producing pieds, he would hold back het pied females, not visual pied females, because the het pieds are typically go every year, where the female pieds, yes, would be maybe every other year. You know, some will go every year, but yeah, there was some inconsistency there.
right.
Yeah. Or at least that's what he thought. We all could be wrong. That could be some old ass shit.
Right.
Well, the one thing is I've seen this with hognose, and I mean, extrapolating from them, and I don't know if this is going to apply like certain species. It's definitely probably not going to apply. But the funny thing is with hognose snakes, when there's a new mutation, there seems to be a little bit of a consistent pattern. Not with every new mutation, but a lot of new mutations, the recessive ones, there's been some weakness early on with them, and then once there's this broad, established a line of these mutations like throughout everybody's collections, and there's a lot of like them being outcrossed or whatever, and they're just a lot more diverse. So a lot of these issues that they initially had went away, like pink pastel albino hognose. You'd hear of like sudden deaths and like neurological issues. Now those are like ultra rare. Now you don't even see them. Some of the first albino hognose, you'd hear of like kinking in them, spinal kinks and stuff like that. You would get bug eyeing, and bug eyeing still exists, and it still kind of resurfaces when you do too much like breeding back or selecting the wrong ones to breed, and not paying attention to what you are including in your breeding projects. But it seems like sometimes the diversity into like, again, like some of those piebald ball python people, and that's a funny thing too, because I remember like seeing like, Pete Call with like, of course, Pieds, and then like Ralph Davis and Mark and Kim Bell, and you never hear of like these issues. But then later on, I did hear some people saying, oh yeah, I'm wondering if they just had like bad, luck or results, and they had a deformed clutch and they blamed it on that. But it seems like genetic diversity with like, some of these hognose mutations that did have issues, the genetic diversity, even though those original ones were from wild caught bloodlines and weren't initially that inbred in some cases, the outcrossing to all these different locales and just making this really broad range of very genetics of that mutation seem to really, really help it.
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day too, it's like we're dealing with mutations. A lot of times, you're dealing with mutations. You're just dealing with essentially a genetic defect. So it can never hurt to not have some sort of new blood. And I remember like species that have more parthenogenesis, you can tell, or not tell, but particularly with Warren, they tend to be hirely or more inbred for those animals that tend to have more parthenogenesis in the groups and stuff. So
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So another thing on that, I've been hearing a lot of partho clutches of ball pythons this year, like a lot of them, like more than I think I've ever heard before for a species that I think for years it never even came up in conversation. Yeah. So
it makes me wonder. Because Warren has said, he's like, yeah, well, I've heard him say it with you, Dave. He goes, I don't even understand how ball pythons breed because they're just that inbred. But sometimes I wonder, like, could we be hitting that peak of where, we could be seeing issues because of that? Because I don't know. I mean, I'm sure inbreeding can go on for an extended period of time, but,
I think there's less inbreeding now than ever before, personally. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, you're all right. Well, certain species, like look at rodents. You can start with like a 1.1 mouse group and then breed the shit out of them. Have like, hundreds of them. Keep breeding them back. Make thousands of them. They do relatively well. They do good. As far as from what I see, I'm not a mouse breeding expert. Like some of my mouse breeding groups, they do get tumors when they get older. I don't know if that's a result of that or a result of that, lineage or what. But anyway, certain species reptiles, like naturally through evolution and adaptation can handle a lot of inbreeding. Ball pythons, though, I don't really see them being that inbred. I mean, they started with so many fucking wild caught ball pythons, and ball python people, I think, are passively, not consciously doing it, outcrossing ball pythons all the time because you're getting the sunset. Where the fuck did that come from? Somewhere in Benin, Ghana, or Togo, or I don't know if they're collecting really outside of that, like Burkina Faso or any of these or Sierra Leone. I don't think they go over there. But anyway, and then they have like a banana. You're breeding that. This guy, has a candy ball python. There's orange dreams. There's shit fucking everywhere. I don't think they're that inbred because they're always these are kind of circling around. And then in the wild, they're not really, I don't think migrating that far. See, I don't know too much about ball pythons, but I do know they, are kind of semi-fossorial, and I don't think they're moving around. I don't think they have a massive range.
Yeah. No, I think that's why the species in general, I think that's why they can handle it better than most. Because like you said, I don't think they have, because there was a recent paper that came out not too long ago about the African species of python and their lineage and stuff. They're one of the oldest lineage of pythons out there, 33 million years old. Is when the first original colonies of pythons or whatever group came over, and ball pythons are 26 million years old. That's older than Australia. Let's put it to you like this: pythons weren't even in Australia yet before ball pythons were a thing. That's how old those lineage of that's how old ball pythons are. So that's why I think they're one of the most adaptive, particularly pythons. How they're just so hardy and able to deal with a lot is because they literally have seen some shit.
Yeah, I mean, look at you can overfeed them because they evolved and adapted to fasting for long periods and storing and gorging when there is a lot of food available. So they're really good at being overfed because in the wild sometimes they do have to feed excessively. They have that body to store that excess fat, and they have the nutritional stores in that fat. And it's like this Dalton guy. Dalton Richer, I agree with him. Richer, I think it's Richer. Dalton Richer. I feel like ball pythons are one of the least inbred species in the hobby. Yeah, I think in the wild, they might be even more inbred. In the captivity, we're having all these different locales, and again, we're just swirling around. Here's a ghost, here's a DG, here's an axanthic. We're trading one with Bob Vu. I got this one from Quebec. I'm doing this. That one got an orange dream in it. This one's got fucking this and that in it. It's like Jesus.
Well, I think it was on I think when Warren, I don't know if it was Warren that personally did this, but I think he looked at a bunch of how related a lot of the species are. All the Florida berms are all real closely related. They don't seem to have issues.
They don't give a shit.
Ball pythons, they did them. They were all closely related. Bolin's pythons. Believe it or not, Bolin's pythons. A lot of the Bolins were all closely related. They weren't very.
Is it sure it's not something that's evolutionary? Like you take a ball python, because the thing is, obviously ball pythons, they collect them from large, vast areas. Now, I could see a lot of them being showing some partial relation, but some of these things I feel like they did just through logic, they have to be somewhat genetically diverse, unless all ball pythons are inherently very similar. You know what I mean? Because again, Benin, Ghana, Togo, they got ball pythons from all over, and imagine going to a small locale where the ball pythons aren't really moving around that much. In the pattern where these ones are breeding is a much smaller range versus in captivity. All right, we got all these small ranges from everywhere in this area, and we've encompassed them. So maybe you see just a lot of similarities. I don't know. Some of these DNA tests, those things, I don't know exactly how they work. A lot of it to me just seems like it's process of elimination. They sequence the genome of an animal. they take these genetics of these animals and they just contrast it to see what common alleles. So if an animal shows a ton of common alleles, it's like, yeah, but you know, I don't know how they're discerning these allele variants, because you can have animals that are, serious. I'm not a pro on gene sequencing and DNA analysis to identify relations of animals. So actually, I should probably shut up right here. So I'm going to.
I mean, I don't think you're. I think what it is, I think they could be closely related, but they just don't have any. If they didn't have any issues, well, I think that's why they're okay, more fun or more adaptable to it being inbred. Because typically, what happens with a lot of these animals, especially the longer you've been around, chances are you probably face bottlenecks throughout.
Right. I was going to bring up cheetahs. Like all cheetahs. Like it's like I don't think there's not many cheetahs. We actually talked about this last time. Like there's only a few thousand cheetahs, but they can actually tell through looking at their DNA. At one point, they said there was like only probably like a few dozen of these things. There's something like that, some like really low number.
Oh yeah.
Because they said their genetic makeup now is they're ultra related, and they said they could tell from it that at one point these things were actually nearly extinct, and it was some type of climate change that was like. Man, I think it was like 10, 20,000. I think it's like 10, 20,000 years ago. Maybe it was around like the mini ice age. And they said that's what did it. And they almost went extinct. And so, these animals bottleneck. And then, so maybe ball pythons at one point were like that. So they're kind of all closely related, because it's like, there's a lot of, like, I mean, they import like 40,000 a year.
Yeah.
I mean, they might be, here's the thing, even if they are getting from the same areas, they have to be pretty unrelated or from different ranges. Where the fuck are you finding 40,000? You're not finding them in like 1 square mile area. It's like, where the fuck are you guys even, like, how do you keep taking them? And the population is still fine. And you can just keep taking it. We got another 40, 50,000 farm range. You got another 40, 50,000. It's almost like there's a black hole, and ball pythons are coming out of this black hole or something. Or a wormhole, I should say. Black hole kills stuff, I guess, or spaghettifies shit. So this one is, we got a wormhole where these balls. It's like, where the fuck do you guys keep finding these things? Where you can just take them, and it's like, seems like there's a never-ending supply of them. And also, there's CITES. We do that to protect and monitor the wild numbers. Hey, grab another 50,000 this year.
Right. When in most cases, I don't even see why we need to.
We don't. But somebody wants to get them for $2 each, so they can flip them for $7 fucking bucks.
Right.
And they want to do it 10,000 times, so they can fucking pay for their house.
But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Inbreedings is one of those situations. I mean, some stuff you just don't have a choice. Like, if you're dealing with Australian stuff, your chances are you're just going to deal with some type of, at least a degree or mostly a degree of inbreeding. Certain just species in general, like locality boas. A lot of the island boas are all fairly closely related. So I mean, I think to a degree you just. I mean, wasn't there what was it? Was it gray banded king snakes that were like 30 generations inbreeding, and they didn't have any kind of
knowing gray banded people? Probably, because they're terrified to breed one that's like a viewable, like a distance where you can't view where you caught the other one. If it's out of view, it's like somehow different. These guys are crazy. We should actually have a gray banded king snake person on and ask them where their drinking water comes from. Try to discern where this fucking insane locale. I think it's kind of just like one-upping one another. You know what I mean? At one point, they're like, this locale. It's like, and they start like doing the gatekeeping, kind of like, one-upping the other person. Like, well, I only breed them from this locality. And then it gets down to it. It's like, well, I found mine underneath the same board. And it's like, you bred one from another rock pile? You're a piece of shit.
So there's 2 studies that actually could happen that would be unique that we could see in our lifetime is like Hog Island boas were thought to be extinct at one point because we overcollected. That population seems to be coming back now. I'd be curious on the difference in these animals now where they had to start back from a smaller group. If it's a smaller species moving forward, if there's something different they might see. Same thing with monkey tails. There's been some areas where monkey tails where they've almost depleted populations. I'd be very curious what their next generation looks like compared to previous generations. Well, I'm struggling to talk tonight, guys.
Oh, you're all right. I think one thing
I'm
is,
forgetting to breathe. I'm like long sentences. I got to take some breaths in there. Like,
it's a good thing you're outside.
yeah.
Fresh air.
Getting cold.
But yeah, there's been a bunch of species like that. Kofiao, the green pythons, those were overly collected, I remember. And now I guess they're still there. I've never heard. I just think the populations is really, really small, you know. So yeah, I know a lot of those species on those small islands a lot of times can suffer from like over collecting for, you know, especially back in the day when that's a lot of that stuff was getting brought in.
Well, so I guess what I was trying to say, but it was long worded, is just what are those populations going to be like moving forward? Are they going to be like their ancestors, or is this highly inbred species now going to is it going to be different?
Oh, more selected or something for different looks or something like that. I mean,
No, you're not even listening to me. Maybe it's me. I don't know.
I think you're changing. Well, yeah, if like a species number gets limited, and then yeah, you got like a degree
Okay, how about
of
this? The Hog Island,
set in a different direction.
population of Missouri.
In Missouri, what the fuck are you talking about? In your collection?
The Plains. No. The Plains Hognose of Missouri.
Yeah.
That very, very small little area where these things have been breeding for God knows how long. We talked about head structure being different, the overall look of the animal kind of being a little different from, again, over inbreeding in this small population.
Well, there's a locality difference for that particular area. Like that little isolated population of Missouri, I bet before they developed Missouri, there was actually a pretty good range of plains hognose that kind of followed along the Mississippi River, where you had some of these like existing plains habitats, these prairie, the short and tall grass prairie habitats. But through agriculture and degradation, unfortunately, they removed like all of it except for one little area, and that area is so fucking small now. And I was talking to a guy, is actually a reptile talk, so I gave a little talk about hognose snakes, and you know I kind of went all over the place. I talked about what they eat naturally in the wild, how I feed mine in captivity, you know, myths about them and whatnot. So anyway, you know, just the guy after the talks came up to me and he's excited to talk about hognose. He goes, "Hey, actually, when I go to that area of Missouri," I'm like, "Oh, I know where that's at." I was like, "That's the only area in the whole state, unfortunately, where they can be found." And he goes, "Yeah, they're dusty hognose." I'm like, "Yeah, but where do they call them that?" I was like, "They're not a separate, you know, subspecies. You know, the dusty hognose is just kind of like a locale title for a particular look. Like they have like a smaller blotch count, and they kind of sometimes have a little grainier background pattern, or it's like more flecking. That's why they're referred to as dusties. They don't always have to have that though, but usually they have like kind of bigger, blockier blotches and a lower blotch count. But really, you can find them even in parts of Texas. There is no actual subspecies gloidei. Heterodonascus gloidei doesn't exist. But this guy was like, "Well, these ones actually look different." And I was, "Yeah, I know." I was like, they're actually overall darker in that particular range. And they do have cool looking blotches. Because when we look at this one's head structure, and their head structure to me has always looked very normal. He showed me this one. I'm like, "Ooh, like that one looks a little different." I think that might actually be from inbreeding. I think it might be finally catching up to them, because that area is pretty small. I think it's only about like the size of like maybe like 6 or 8 football fields, and like that's it. You know, maybe a little bigger than that. Maybe, I don't know. It's not very large, and so they have this very small range, and there might only be around like 100 some individuals, you know, on that area. I mean, they're doing okay. I've seen people find up to like 5 in a year, or sorry, 5 in a day, 5 or 6 in a day, but it's usually like in early October, and when babies are hatching and stuff, or have already hatched out and they're a few weeks old, and they find like a few babies, like 1 or 2 adults. I don't think they're gonna. I think they probably need to reintroduce some probably wild outside lineage in there at some point. And it'd be nice if somebody could donate some money and buy up some farmland, you know, near there, just to expand the range. Because that's the one problem with all these species, and everybody's all aware of it. I mean, it's common sense. Any of these species that are classified as endangered or critically endangered, pretty much every single one of them is going to remain on that list or get tougher, because they're not expanding their habitat. You know, plains hognose in Missouri will always be critically endangered. If not, I mean, they'll intervene because they'll have programs and grants to breed hognose and re-release them if that ever does happen. I'm sure if they get into such a lower number, because somebody will probably have the interest to do that. But they'll always be in this state of peril until they make more habitat, and they're not going to because land is so expensive and it's all agriculture. It's like, you know, what are you gonna do? Buy up like few 100 square miles of Missouri, and then you got to take all this money, time, and effort to turn it back into prairie and reintroduce species. It's just like, you know, while that's possible and it would be good, it's just not feasible for, you know, agriculture, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No. So I got 5% left of my battery.
Well, we are at about 2.5 hours in, and I am actually at a friend's house, so I probably should be going.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
It's all right.
I apologize for fucking this up in the beginning.
You did not. If I was going to breed Kentucky Pines, I'd want 3 males per female. Lisa's talking about those extra males. Lisa, I mean, I think having extra males, and we've talked about this too, Dave and William, it's pretty beneficial to have extra males. That seems to be the big key with any species that's hard to breed. Even my female hognose are reluctant to breed. Here's the trick. You keep putting in more fucking males pretty much. You put in other snake sheds, maybe you drive them around, go down through the valley, elevation changes, take them outside, spray it with water, put a bunch of males in there, lots of stimulation, and then usually you start to get some type of result, you know. You see green anacondas breed in the wild, with water snakes. Even sometimes I've seen hognose snakes, you know, use 2 males on a female. Green anacondas, you got like a ball of males. Looks like Medusa's head. You know,
I sometimes wonder, particularly with pythons and pythons you probably hear it the most with, but like combating species, or quote, you hear they combat. I sometimes wonder too, is that based, is it like, it's not a set rule? Is that just more of a size rule? Like, the bigger the male gets, because typically if an animal is going to combat, it's the bigger and badder males. The little satellite males or the smaller males, well, obviously they're not going to be able to compete with those big, heavy or stronger males. But if they can all work, like if they're all together, like the smaller males are grouped up, well, then it's just, if they don't have a reason to combat with each other, then it's kind of like what you see with group breeding, where it's just as many of them are trying to go at that female as possible. And I've seen this with like ball pythons, really small males. If I threw 2 small males in, they don't have a problem with each other. But if I throw one really big male in, sometimes he'll combat and want to fight the other males, regardless if they're bigger or smaller. I think, well, sometimes most of the time with smaller ones, I'll notice they'll just kind of, I don't know if they fought previously or if the little males are just so intimidated, they're just like, I'm not going to even bother being near this. And the other male just doesn't look at him as a threat. Or
sounds like they're not as mature yet, but I'm sure.
Well,
like,
I've had those young males breed is the thing.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I see yours.
Yeah, so I wonder if like, it's when they're smaller, they, you know, they're not going to be able to compete, but they kind of like, well, you hear it with seals and stuff, where you have a satellite male sneak in and breed with while the beach masters are fighting with each other. The satellite male comes in and breeds with a lot of the females because the males are distracted. So I wonder if something similar happens when you do have those other species that are smaller.
Scott's saying this. I mean, I will say with like my hognose, I know it's like very different. We'll have really young males breeding. Some of them get pretty dominant. But my best and strongest breeder hognose are always my veteran breeder males. And I'm sure that's probably with your pythons and boas too. You're probably your strongest breeder, most aggressive ones that are always like really on the female and they don't really let up, are probably your more mature males the majority of the time.
Well, I think that's whenever Lisa was saying multiple males, I think that's when multiple males would come in handy, is if you have a small males. Well, if you put them all together, well, then you increase the chances of at least a few of them taking that female.
Sure, then you're stimulating them too, that natural competition. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, compared to like one big ass male, huh?
Have you guys ever tried like the cuck chair for snakes, where you just put them in like a deli cup in the corner of the bin and make them watch the other one have at it? Because I hear that works sometimes.
The old cuck chair method. That sounds like a very new trend from watching Instagram Reels.
I don't use Instagram.
Yeah, okay. Custom Scales LLC on Instagram, sure. Okay.
Yeah. What was my last post?
Probably a while ago. All right, Facebook, same thing.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We're at 2.5 hours. I'm going to go talk to my friend and see if I can play one more hand of poker. That's going to be about it.
That was fun, guys.
Yeah, it's fun. Thanks for joining, William and Dave. Thanks everybody for hanging out in chat, putting in some input. Pretty good time. Start off a bit slow. Need to get more into it, but I mean, I think that covers some pretty fun stuff.
I think from like the 35 minutes to 45 minutes sucks. I think other than that, it cruised through. I thought it was good.
We did pretty good. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Laid back. Love talking to you guys. You guys are good friends. Always good discussions and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Aurora said great show. So she thinks we had a good show. I think it was pretty good too.
It was a great show.
By the way, I'm going to get you both up about West Watson too. I'll see you
Okay,
guys.
yeah, let us know. Let us know the plan. That would be fun. I mean, I would like to do some more like maybe content stuff. I mean, I'm just usually just breeding and posting whatever, but content stuff and just even going out, enjoying some vacation time and being out in nature's cool.
Let's face it, we want to see Dave in those kind of environments.
That'd be funny.
I think it'd be great.
Yeah. I'll thrive and not thrive at the same time, but I gotta get a passport.
Yeah, I need that too. All right, guys. Bye, everybody.
All right. See ya.
Ending stream now.